যদি সবাই ফিরে যায়, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায়, যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায়, তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। যদি আলো না ধরে, ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে, যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে, তবে বজ্রানলে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা চলো রে, যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলো রে। একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো, একলা চলো রে।
Was off again. Oh my god. This is embarrassing. So, we are today going to discuss a video from 4 years back, which is apparently famous. It has about 74,000 views, but I did not know about it until a few days back when someone from our live chat, a viewer, recommended it. I'm not sure if it's a debate or not. It says it's a I don't think the word debate has been used. Anyway, it's moderated by Nupur Sharma and Deepak. I think it's going to end up being a debate because there are people like Ashish, Dhar, Deepak, and Madhusudan who disagree with each other vehemently on various things regarding caste. So I'm very much looking forward to this. Let's see. Let's check out some comments. Vikhyat is asking. Deepak said that Jati discrimination must be ended, but Jati identity preserved because many traditions like caste-specific deities, mantras having Varna names depend on Jati thoughts. Yeah, fair enough. I have no problem if it is just that. To Steelman Kushal Mehra, people like Kushal Mehra's arguments here, that they think that the discriminatory aspects, like not letting Dalits ride a horse on the streets of some portions of Rajasthan, as far as I know, those kinds of things won't go away unless you quit just one fine morning, forget your Jati identity completely. That's what they believe in. Now, I have more hopes from the Hindu society. I hope I won't be let down. So right now in my life, I'm on the position that, yes, carry on with your traditional duties, rituals and stuff. In your home, regarding your puja and stuff, in your personal temple and stuff. But if your Jati identity asks you to prevent people from getting on a horse on the streets, then to tumhara identity chahe tel lene bhai, wo to allow nahi kiya ja sakta hai. That's all. Is this a reaction video? Yes, it is. Hello Sumit. Hello VXT. Sparsh. Hello. Why always live at midnight? It's mainly a musician's body clock, no? Aftudni. After constantly hating Gandhi, Desai seems to have same position on Jati as Gandhi, shows the contradictory nature of modern day Hindutwadis. By the way, weren't some people hinting that it's Desai Deepak that Ajit Bharti was talking about when he made a cryptic post a few days back or a few weeks back that some famous Hindutva influencer is joining Congress? Did any news come out about that? Who was it really? Was it J. Sai Deepak? I think I would have known if from Twitter at least if J. Sai Deepak joined Congress. But does anyone know about this? All of it goes back to positive and negative rights when it comes to caste. Absolutely. Anything that relates to negative rights for your caste, you are free to do. No positive rights. J. Sai Deepak is not a Hindutvadi. He is on the Indic side apparently, not any ideology. I think that's a fair assessment because he consciously avoided bringing up Veer Savarkar ever. And earlier I used to think that's because he wants to keep some liberals happy. Now I realize he's on the further right of Veer Savarkar. Therefore, he won't really call himself Hindutvadi or... I think he says the word Hindutva enough, but at least not Savarkar. Daily Life is saying Kushal Mehra is not Maharashtrian. He never did a podcast in Marathi despite having an opportunity on many occasions. Why do you think so? Maybe his predicament is like mine, that I think my viewership would be just too less for a Bengali speaking audience. I don't think that's a factual statement or statistically correct statement because many Bengali YouTubers exist. But the way my the flavor that I carry in my channel, that would not be very popular with just a Bengali speaking audience. That might be Kushal's view as well. Kushal Mehra is Punjabi, yes. I know he's not Marathi. He is a Maharashtrian who's not a Marathi, of course. Aman is saying, even on the day when equality comes, wouldn't a Brahmin tag still carry the baggage of oppression? अमन, पहली बात तो है कि इक्वालिटी नाम का कोई चीज नहीं आएगा कभी. See, it's a good thing that you brought this up because I was going to say some other stuff regarding the first question of Vikhyat as well. See, what people like Kushal think that unless you quit all your Jati identity, even your discrimination is not going to go away, right? Now, one proof of that might be, in one way at least, in just one way, that see, there is no that overt जाति slurs, discrimination, दलित को घोड़े पे बैठने नहीं देंगे, वो सब बंगाल में नहीं है, because Bengal lost a lot of its Hinduness and Hindu identity as well. So if that's the view, that you have to stop being a Hindu to stop being a casteist, that might be one claim, and Bengal seems to back it up. But you see, since casteism, status group based hierarchies and discrimination, in some way or the other, with varying degrees, is inevitable in the end, because even in the state where there is no overt casteist slurs or caste-based discrimination like in West Bengal, even there, in all positions of power, it's Brahmins, Boiddos, Kaistos in all positions of power, and it's the Dalits who die in every political violence incidents, or whether it's Modi Jhapi or even today's Panchayat election, any election. Okay, why can't I turn my phone off? Yeah. तो एक सिचुएशन है कि एक तरह का कास्टिज्म हमेशा रहेगा. दूसरा आर्ग्यूमेंट उस साइड का ये भी है कि almost the same argument from the other side of the coin, really, that you have to quit all your Hinduness to get rid of casteism. But I don't think that can be the case if free markets really take over and the state stops recognizing castes. Then it's going to really help end discrimination. Please share joining link. No, today is so not audience interaction, you know. Code Fest, hello. Many of his subscribers since he started were Maratha, Maharashtrian. Yeah, obviously. तो वहाँ पे ही लोग उनको पहचानते हैं, वहाँ से तो शुरू होगा ही. सबका तो मेरे जैसा नहीं है. मेरा तो बेस स्टार्ट ही हुआ बेंगलोर से. Mainly because of Bangalore and Pune. Those were my core audience base in the beginning years. Firstly, because J. Sai Deepak used to share some of my Instagram posts. वहाँ पे Instagram पे देख के लोग मुझे follow करना शुरू किए. And then I made a viral video on why Vararupam is not a copy of Navarasa. वहाँ से पूरा का पूरा कन्नड़ी का audience हो गया मेरा. After that, Bengali started joining my channel. आज है तो रात? No, it's pretty common. I usually do at night only. Vikhyat is also from Bengaluru. Okay, any important comments here? How can JSD join Congress? How will that make any sense? I saw some ways that can happen. All of it goes by, yeah, okay, let's start with that now. Ashish Dhar is an underrated voice in the Hindutva universe. And he will go on being underrated because he's just too pissed off to clarify all his points about how he is not casteist. And some of his stuff can come across as casteist, but the best thing to do in these situations is to ask point blank questions that do you support this Dalit guy not being allowed to drink water from this particular well, or do you support this guy not being able to get on a horse and stuff? Ask point blank questions about direct casteist situations. Do you support this? Do you support this? Do you support this? That's the only way. Otherwise, it's just ambiguous vibes that you get. You get non-casteist, anti-casteist vibes from some people, and you get casteist vibes from some people. उसके basis पे तुम कितना तक जा पाओगे? Okay, let's start. It's back when even Op India had horrible video quality and streaming quality. They were also using StreamYard back then. गरीब थे Op India तब. Okay, let's start. I don't know who this Ravi guy is. Does anyone know who he is? Gravity saying, but JSD's speeches are not compatible with Congress ideology or vote bank politics, isn't it? How will he get rid of his digital footprints? Maybe I thought if at all it is Desai Deepak, it's maybe because someone from the Congress now wants to get on this side of the bandwagon as well. उतना अगर दिमाग है तो उसके लिए क्या होगा शायद. Let's start. ये भी म्यूट है. क्या हो रहा है मेरी जिंदगी में?
And everybody is audible and visible.
Okay, great. So I welcome everyone who watches and listens and reads the content of Op India for this, I think, perhaps the most awaited conversations, stroke debates, stroke discussions, stroke fights or street fights or whatever it may be, ultimately whatever it morphs into. But this is something that I was certainly looking forward to since last evening. And
so if at all someone, in fact, doesn't know who these people are, Nupur Sharma is, I guess, the editor, not editor-in-chief, right? But some senior editor position she has in Op India. Arihant, very insanely well-read guy, host of the podcast Vad, one of my favorite podcasts in the country. Ashish Dhar, host of the podcast and discussion YouTube channel called Upward. Harsh Madhusudan, economist, author. Ravi, I don't know who he is. And Desai Deepak is Desai Deepak.
And I look forward to listening to each of these brilliant panelists. Arihant Pavaria, Ashish Dhar, Harsh Madhusudan, and Ravi Lochanan Iyengar, with their perspectives on each of these different aspects of the issue. Broadly, what is it that we hope to cover is one, our respective understanding of the genesis of caste, its current application or relevance or contemporariness, and what is it that we believe should be the way forward.
Why hasn't this kind of a debate been hosted more or again repeatedly? So important. I guess all of them are pissed off with each other on just this caste issue.
And we hope to address several issues which are perhaps corollary or concomitant to this larger issue. And the format of the debate, as Nupur already put out, is I think each participant gets about 5 minutes to present their opening positions. Post which each of them gets an opportunity to pose rebuttals for 3 minutes each, and they will have to identify the person that this particular question or their questions are being addressed to or directed at, and the person gets 3 minutes to respond to those questions. Once we are done with this, we take questions from the moderators, hopefully 2 follow-up questions each to each of the panelists, and then we throw the questions open, or rather the session open to the audience for their questions. There is a decent chance that some of our questions, as part of the moderator's questions, could actually be from the audience questions itself. Be that as it may, we will try and ensure that as many questions are taken as possible, because I think this session has attracted a lot of attention and the backdrop to the session, of course. So I hope to hear the erudite views of each of the erudite panelists, and let's have fun. So let's start.
One second, I'd like to say something. Thank you, all of you, for agreeing to do this. I know that there has been a lot of background talk to why we are all here. Let's try and ensure that everybody sticks to their designated time slot so that everybody gets a chance to talk. Let's keep it civil, which I'm sure all of you will. So, Arihant,
mics, right?
Yes, the rest of us can mute our mics when the opening remarks are on.
Okay. Thank you, Nupur. Thank you, Sai. First of all, we should all remember the upcoming August 5 event that we should, recognize the importance of our Hindu identity, the importance of keeping our traditions intact and protecting it, and the importance of coming together and achieving. If we all come together and achieving, that's what we should focus on, whatever the content, whatever the debate we have today. So starting with the topic, of course, caste discrimination. First of all, I would like to say that we should avoid the usage of the foreign words like caste and focus on our own words like jati and varna, which will give us a better perspective.
This was a cool thing to say in back then, 4 years back. It doesn't make any sense now. Even 2-3 years back, even I used to say it. It's not that important. Caste, the word caste works pretty well, even, but for jati mainly.
Better understanding and resolving our differences. But
Oh, Havla Prince. That one I have seen. In that one, Desai Deepak, Arihant were not there. It was mainly between Ranganathan, Harsh Madhusudan, Abhijit Mitra, Kushal. So all four of them kind of agree with each other. So that's not that important of a debate really. But it was very informative. It was not really a debate.
whatever they are. So as Nicholas Turk's renowned scholar on caste,
Janki Bakle ke husband.
he mentioned why I'm saying this is that the caste, the word, if we use caste, then it has certain connotations from the West, from the Portuguese. If we take that, then he pointed out that, as I will just quote him verbatim, he said that using that word caste, it created an impression that under the British system, it became a single term capable of expressing, organizing, and above all, systematizing India's diverse forms of social identity, community, and organization. So this is something we have to look at. Now, let's look at the history, genesis of Varna system. I believe that it is not central aspect of Hinduism. Sanatana Dharma existed before the birth-based Varna system came into place. We know from the scriptures, from Vedas, that there is no mention of birth-based Varna system. We have mention of Brahmanas.
Corroborated by Irfan Habib. Eke Brahmo, come on. Why does a cricketer's son become a cricketer? Why does a musician's son become a musician? Same for those same reasons. Why does Bollywood stars keep producing children who are also Bollywood stars? Everyone wants their children to follow their path if they are successful in life. Every child will feel much more comfortable getting into their parents' profession. And especially back then when there's not much opportunities to do, there's no technology, so you can't do any random thing and find and gather knowledge about any random thing on the internet. It's more understandable that people will join their parents' profession. The question you might be hinting towards is that how did it get codified? How did it become rigid? So any society that goes on long enough will start codifying things into law which works best in their society. They are thinking that, okay, this is a nice thing that's going on. Society is going great. Why not say that, yes, you have to do these things now? Imagine tomorrow if someone concludes from the BJP, from the positions of power, that, okay, YouTubers have really helped the Hindutva cause. Therefore, this percentage of people have to become Hindutvadi YouTubers. They have to be Hindutvadi and they have to be YouTubers only. Codify kar diya. वैसे
Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and their respective roles, but it was not birth based. Now, as we progress as a society around 1000 years, 1500 BC, we start seeing that rigidity is taking place, and this is also attested by the DNA evidence from 2000 years ago that the endogamy is settled in, and then it is enshrined in the society. So we also see that from the Vedas, we don't have that mention of birth-based Varna, but as we move to Purana.
And endogamy, see, the problem with these discussions is that apparently that even all of them are falling in the trap of considering the Indian caste system in an isolation, in a vacuum. And people who hate caste system as leftists, people who hate caste system as right-wingers, people who love the caste system as trads, all of them think it's a distinct, specific Indian or Hindu system which was far removed from everything else, and it was only for specifically Sanatanis or the Vedic people, Brahminical to be academic here. So, which is not the case. First of all, it's caste status groups, and secondly, as pointed out by Irfan Habib again in that famous paper, that the Shakya clan, it was an endogamous clan before even having anything to do with the Varna system. They joined the Varna system and keep on being endogamous, the Shakya clan. So it's just an organic thing that's going to always happen. That was at least happening back then, is going to happen in different ways these days.
Brahmana texts and smritis, we start seeing the even codification of the existing modes. So that is briefly I want to touch upon the what is the genesis and how it is transformed from non-birth based to birth based system. Now the another aspect is the contemporary discrimination that we have today. Most people, as we have seen, that people have been asking us to include that person, this person from that caste. They assume that it is a simple caste system with rigid hierarchy where one caste is Brahmins oppress the others, or OBCs oppress others.
Good question. IPL is an example of capitalism disrupting the society, not a feudal society.
So I would just like to highlight the complexity of the system, caste system, is that even though Brahmins are demonized for...
Yeah, they failed. A lot of these cricketers would have liked their children to become cricketers. तो वो बन नहीं पाए because of the fierce competition which is allowed today legally because of anti-caste laws. अगर लीगल होता, अगर पहले का लॉ चलता, तब चूतिए क्रिकेटर से ही भरे पड़े होते. सचिन तेंदुलकर का बेटा आज इंडिया का कैप्टन होता.
Persisting with the caste system for the last 70 years, we don't have a Brahmanized system or state-sponsored casteism in favor of the upper caste. So even then, we have not been able to abolish the system. And the most of the atrocities that are committed today, if we take the case studies, if we take the data, if we go by that, then we will find that most of the atrocities on lower castes are committed by OBCs and other castes taught by the Brahmins.
Why does this happen, by the way? OBCs का क्या, उनको क्या पड़ी है, ऐसे क्यों करते हैं ये लोग? I think owning land has a lot to do with it. When Brahmins were being gifted land, they were doing their shenanigans. But अब तो Brahmins को कोई पूछता नहीं है. अब OBCO का जमाना है और बहुत साल हो गए, बहुत बड़े लैंड ओनर्स बन गए हैं, इसलिए शायद इतना कास्टिज्म करने का दम मिलता है.
Another thing is that I want to highlight is that it's not so simple. We have witnessed that the so-called lower castes, where they are in majority, are found in some instances committing atrocities on the so-called upper caste. These may be exceptions. Yeah. What?
I said you have 30 seconds left.
Okay.
For your 5 minutes.
So this is just, I want to highlight the complexity of the system that is practiced as today. Now the way forward, as I said, we have, personally I feel that the caste system that we have today is dehumanizing to most of the people, and it should be abolished. And for me, I think the Hindu identity takes precedence over caste system, but we have to understand that we cannot abolish the caste. We must try to abolish the caste-based discrimination. Abolishing caste or annihilation of caste is a fool's errand, that I personally believe. So going forward, our focus should be on productive areas like ending the discrimination in birth-based caste discrimination or superiority.
A.K. Brahmo, I'm very surprised that you are asking these questions. Isn't it obvious too? Isn't it too obvious? Just like today, on the streets, who do you have more respect for? Let's say, who do you stop your cycle or bike or car to talk to? Someone famous or a random rickshaw puller? How did you decide that the rickshaw puller is not deserving of you stopping your car and talking to him about how his day was. Every job, based on how important the job is and how exclusive that job is, how much exclusive skills are required to do that job, that predicates economics, which in turn predicates status. उस basis पे ही होगा. It's organic. No one has to decide. Everyone knows by default.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Arihan. Next, we have Ashish. Could you please take?
Exactly, क्योंकि ब्राह्मण्स को अब ये सेंटेंस हम बोलेंगे तो बहुत नॉन ट्रेड राइट विंगर्स भी गुस्सा हो जाएंगे, but this is not an anti-Brahmin statement. Think of Brahmins. If you don't think of Brahmins as academics and IAS officers of today, you won't understand caste at all. तो भाई ब्राह्मण्स का काम था कोडिफाई करना, अटेस्टेट करना. जो ब्राह्मण कोडिफाई कर रहे थे, जो सोसाइटी डिसाइड कर रहा था, ब्यूटीफुली पुट हियर बाय हाफ ब्लड प्रिंस, that those same Brahmins, not exactly same Brahmins, but many Brahmins were also creating fake genealogies for anybody who had money and were changing their caste. Think of Deepak Gupta's research on Rajasthan, Hitesh Ranjan Shanal's research on Bengal.
The floor and give us complete remarks.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're.
If Brahmins didn't codify it, who codified it? कोई रैंडम कोई लिख दिया टेक्स्ट में, वो कोडिफाई हो गया. शूद्रों ने टेक्स्ट लिखना शुरू कर दिया क्या?
Am I audible? Right. So first of all, many thanks to Op India and Nupur and all the co-panelists for joining this discussion. As this has been triggered by my tweets from a few days ago, it is incumbent upon me to clarify and clearly lay out the intent and objective of sticking my neck out on this controversial topic. So let me articulate my position on the matter as clearly as I can.
Chalo, since Ashish Dhar hasn't started his argument, let me just get into this. Vedas Gupte, this sentence doesn't mean anything. What do you mean when you say caste system should be eradicated? Tell me. The reservation, the government recognizing castes, people remembering their jati names, their jati traditions, which one are you talking about? Or are you talking about just the discrimination, not letting Dalits get on horses and stuff? Yeah, that should be eradicated.
Number one, in my opinion, it is extremely critical for Hindus to have a crystal clear view of the Varna
Yes, Brahmins didn't create it. They codified it.
Vyavastha as it was practiced in pre-colonial times. Primarily,
Good question, Eke Brahmo. Because of the changing incentives.
for two reasons. A, caste is the stick that is used to beat us in academia, in the media, in popular culture. And unless we have a reasonably clear view of what jatis essentially are, we will continue to be shamed into submission. So for me, decolonization calls for an honest encounter with the realities of pre-colonial India, and that without feeling obligated to spit on the faces of our glorious ancestors. B, India's contemporary political discourse is deeply casteist, and yet, despite being independent for more than 7 decades now, caste-based problems don't seem to be going away. In fact, they are only increasing by the day, getting more horrid. This despite reservations, this despite legislations like the SC/ST Atrocities Act.
Exactly, Chhatra Pawan. IAS बाबू जिनका अटेस्टेट करना काम है, वो अटेस्टेट नहीं करेगा तो क्या करेगा? अटेस्टेंट के लिए उसको पैसे मिलते हैं कोडिफाई करने को, टेक्स्ट लिखने को.
Antiques like burning of Manusmriti and all these dramas. Point number 2, based on my reading on the subject and interaction with various scholars, I understand that the problems of caste have their genesis in the colonial times, with the breakdown of traditional institutions and a profound disruption in the socio-economic life of the people of India. So I argue here that the so-called lower castes fell on bad days, not because of, but despite the Varna Vyavastha, right? Not because of the Varna Vyavastha, but despite the Varna Vyavastha, I repeat. Because Varna Vyavastha, I view as like I mentioned in the tweet, a nature-nurture matrix and a social security net that was formalized at some point in the past. Number 3, I vehemently disagree with the colonial narrative of systematic exploitation of the so-called lower castes of pre-colonial India. When I look at the material achievements of the Hindu civilization, I see temples, sculptures, paintings, art, and unparalleled craftsmanship. All this to me is plain and simple Shudra glory, right? To deny these jatis their place of pride in history has been a failure of the Indian English educated elites of today. And to be honest, if I'm ashamed of anything, I am ashamed of these modernistas.
Ashish sir blamed it all on the British. I agree with it 50%. British did what the Brahmins did centuries before them. They codified it further. They did not leave any room for further changing your caste. You change your professions now, become whatever, you still, your name is frozen forever and ever in that jati.
Number 4. In this context, it is important to understand the role of the Dharmashastras in pre-modern Hindu society. They were not edicts or commandments, but a crystallization of centuries of experimentation and an expression of the will of a free people, much like the Constitution of India is intended to be. I don't know if it does that, if it is able to do that. That Deepak would be a better person to answer, but at least the intention was there. Number 5, instead of obsessing over what Manusmriti says, what the Upanishads say, without even doing a cursory reading of the texts, the point of our collective interest should be the link between colonialism, global capitalism, ecological crisis, technological revolution, and land reforms in free independent India, and the current status of the so-called lower caste jatis, because these are all interlinked issues according to me. In other words, the problem of casteism has economic as opposed to religious roots. And I'm keen to hear what the economists on the panel have to say about these things. Number 6.
Good stuff.
You have 30 seconds,
Yeah.
Ashish.
Number 6, there has been much tom-tomming of Hindu political unity recently, and I believe that the Hindu ideal is harmony between jatis and sampradayas, and not the idea of a monocultural unity popularized.
This is where Ashish Dhar, I lose on Ashish Dhar because a Hindu identity, if it really requires that kind of unity, the state has to stop recognizing castes. And my submission is this, that if free market is allowed to take over, if state stops recognizing castes, people won't even remember their caste in the first place. Okay, it will take 1 or 2 generations to forget everything. I'm saying if you want to conserve it. I don't think you will be able to. But he's saying that it has to be a harmony between castes. There I have a big problem, because what the texts mean or meant were harmony between different status groups. Back then, those status groups of those years with those names, they don't map onto today's status groups. So today we'll have to understand that those texts, if we map them onto today, if we extrapolate them to today, which we should, we are looking for harmony between all statuses of Hindus.
By some famous Twitter handles. Their attacks on Puranas, on tantric practices, Murti Puja, and anything that they don't basically understand are attacks on Sanatan Dharma. And their project of destruction of jatis is nothing less than the end of our civilization. And just my last thing before going, I just want to say that I come to the discussion with an exploratory mindset. And I believe that anyone who makes a claim that, or who holds a firm, non-negotiable position on the complex realities of caste is either an ignoramus or has malicious intent. Reducing caste to a colonial trope is simply not acceptable. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ashish. Next, we have Harsh.
Ashish is saying something important. I would like to add something to it. It doesn't mean British did the fact that they did it without any cultural context, but that didn't happen out of the blue. Okay, they had their informers, their specific Brahmins from specific places who told them these stories that हम यहाँ पे बड़े आदमी हैं, हमारे चाचा विधायक है, वो हमारे तरफ से हमारे लोगों ने ही बोला है. आउट ऑफ द ब्लू, ब्लैंक, मतलब कोलकाता के राजभवन में बैठ के वाइसरॉय ने खुद से बना नहीं दिया था. Now I'll have to take this point from one guy who was talking about classical music. Wait, that was hilarious. Where did it go? Yeah, VXT is saying, I just heard my commie friend say they hate Indian classical music because ragas have a jati and how that shows even music was casteist in India. Lol. A few days back, I think yesterday or 2 days back in a live stream, we were discussing how commies of today who are under 25, those commies are absolutely insane. And when we were leftists, we were not like them. Even today, all my leftist friends pride themselves in knowing way more about Indian classical music, some of them being practitioners, some of them being former practitioners, and therefore being more Indian, more Hindu than me, because they know Indian classical music more than me. And they say that you are a fake Hindutwadi because you are a fucking metalhead. We know more about Indian culture because we know this brilliant thing called Indian classical music, which you don't know. Okay, तो ये जो पागल आर्ग्यूमेंट है यहाँ पे VXT जिसका एग्जांपल दे रहा है, वो हमारे जनरेशन में नहीं था भाई, हमारे टाइम पे ये सब नहीं था. But Gravity gave a counter to this. He's saying, well, is bringing out something very important here. He's saying, well, in Bengal, the same commies will treat you like anything, a low intellect person if you fail to listen to Rabindranath Songit or happen to not like it. That's casteism as well. Oh my God. The casteism surrounding Rabindranath Songit is insane. And if I start telling stories about incidents of things that can be described or called casteism regarding Rabindranath Songit, this live stream would be 5 hours long. First, Rabindranath Songit used to happen with just an Esraj. First, when harmonium was introduced, people said, no, what, how the fuck, how dare you use harmonium? Then Piyush Kanti Mishra or Sarkar? Piyush Kanti Sarkar, right? He introduced synthesizers, everyone lost their fucking minds. Then Nochikeda just changed the groove of the song in my favorite Bengali movie of all time, Bong Connection. Everyone fucking lost their mind. Okay, Nochiketa said, bhai, I'm just using a computer and changing the rhythm of the song. I'm not changing even the melody. Do you think Rabindranath Tagore would not have used a computer and did different arrangements in this time if he lived right now? He was a goddamn progressive in music, in every way. Okay, so like for example, in the same way that I have changed the rhythm for Akla Chalore, okay, in my intro music and outro music, Akla Chalore is usually supposed to be in the 6/8 rhythm. This is the cute dancing groove that Akla Chalore is supposed to have. I have made this into a 4/4 metal groove. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've turned it into a 4/4 song. That's all Nochiketa did. Then I had a sort of a brother, so not blood brother. So he's a singer. He went on a I don't know if it happens outside Bengal or not. There are morning music shows. Okay, early morning, 6:30, 7 a.m., 5, sometimes 6 a.m. On different TV channels, where random singers are called in to do a day of singing, an hour of singing on one specific composer or singer. And near the end of the show, some people call in to demand specific songs and stuff. So I'm talking about when this is in class, when I was in class 10 or 11. Okay, so about 2010 to 11, 2009 to 12. Okay, sometime during that era. Yeah, 2011 to 2010 to 2013. Okay, sometime between that period. That sort of dada of mine went on a show. He's mainly a Kishore Kumar kind of a singer. He specializes in Kishore Kumar songs, but he went wearing a sleeveless, just carrying his acoustic guitar, and was wearing a bandana. Out of the blue, someone asks him to sing a Rabindranath Songit over the phone. He sings it. He says, no, I'm really not a Rabindranath Songit singer. I can't really do justice. And the person on the phone says, no, but it's okay. It's okay. I really want to listen to Rabindranath Songit in your voice. I want to see how it sounds. He does it. Next call comes in and abuses the hell out of him. Not real gullies, but is very, very very, very angry. Okay. And that dada says, yes, I'm really sorry. That guy says, how dare you sing Rabindranath Songit wearing a sleeveless and a bandana? What the fuck is this? What is this other than casteism? There were huge controversies in Bengal before Vishwabharati's copyright expired. Okay, about different arrangements of Rabindranath Songits by everyone. Everyone used to get into some trouble or the other.
Ash, please.
Thank you, Nupur. First of all, I think it shows the beauty of Dharma that all of us, despite various... Can you hear me? Arihant? Okay. So, despite all the... Okay, sorry, he was just making a symbol.
Yeah, for some
so
reason,
despite all the heated discussions that we are getting together...
Carry on.
Okay, I'll continue then. So for, that we are able to disagree quite heatedly and still get together to discuss that. I think that's the beauty of Dharma. That kind of takfiri attitude of excommunication has not reached us yet, maybe despite some efforts. So I'll come straight to the point. We had this heated discussion because I called Ashish. I regularly delete my tweets. People who follow me, they know that. I did not delete any tweets before I deleted them before I got the invitation for this debate. But I the thing that kind of led to the controversy was I called Ashish Dhar a rank casteist. And having listened to him for the last 5 minutes, I'm still not sure whether I should take it back or not. Let me explain why. So Ashish, and I don't think it's an ad hominem attack. I think it's a descriptive term, and I just want to go through it very rigorously. So, Ashish said that the link between Jati and Varna to birth is undeniable. Please don't distort the Shastras. I agree with him. If there is a Shastric interpretation which says that it is birth-based and your occupation is linked to it, which he said may or may not be his view, but he said that was the reality, then I totally reject that scriptural inscription. So then he wrote, well, but the important point is the question of authority in dharma is critical to our survival. Right? This is exactly what he mentioned. The question of authority in dharma is critical to our survival. He does not have a view, but he says self-congratulatory reformist bakwas. So my point on this is, okay, dharma is it has multitude. It's got a grand word. There are 500 million non-Indian Buddhists outside of India. There are many Westerners converting to various forms of dharma or dhamma. Within India, you have Arunachal Pradesh, you have non-Hindu dharmic panths. In Jharkhand, you have non-Hindu, the Sharmaism. You have modern day gurus who say they reject any kind of caste and they promote inter-caste marriage. And the RSS says, including Bhaiyaji, Suresh Bhaiyaji, that Dalits should be allowed into temples. If any Shankaracharya, respected Shankaracharya, says otherwise, we reject that. So if there is a claim that these guys are not Hindus, I want to listen to that claim. So I believe that dharma is the grand rubric on the top, where I believe the only common denominator is there is reciprocity in spirituality, unlike the Abrahamic proselytizing monotheist mindset. Within that, you can come to either Indic religions or Hinduism directly. Indic religions, I say, because some religions don't like to call themselves Hindu, even though substantially I think they are. And within that, if you come to Hinduism, not just, I was talking about the Honorable Puri Shankaracharya, the Honorable Dwarka Shankaracharya said Sai Baba is not a Hindu. So I've gone to the Sai Baba Mandir. I've also gone to Trimbakeshwar next to it. I have an intercaste marriage. About the intercaste marriage, Puri Shankaracharya said that intercaste marriage leads to bestiality. It will eventually lead to interspecies marriage. I can give you the video. It's on 3 minutes, 25 seconds. I can post it on Twitter later on. So when I listened to Ashish, what he was saying was, he said he does not have his own view, but he rejects reformism. So my question to him, if you cannot say that authority in dharma, you can say dharma ke niche Indic religions, uske niche Hinduism hai, uske niche Brahmanism hai. I am not excommunicating Brahmanism. I'm saying it is a subset. I'm saying you do not get to speak for the entire superset. The question should be the authority in the subset of Brahmanism. You cannot therefore say there is a question of authority in dharma per se, and oh my God, you are not listening. Or
I don't know if he means it in the way I'm going to add on to this, but this reminds me that, remember, we had this point that if the British had set up shop in Haryana and talked to the elders or, let's say, Hinduism experts of that place, today we would know that Jats are the most evil and the topmost caste in the country. It's all based on who the informers of the British were. They happened to meet South Indian and Tamil, mainly Tamil and Bengali Brahmins, who said that हमारे चाचा विधायक हैं, और किसी को मीट करते तो वो भी बोलते कि हाँ हम सबसे बड़े दादा हैं. So it is important that in everybody's eyes the hierarchy is different. Everyone thinks of themselves at the top. But who the fuck will say, unless there are incentives to call yourself lower caste, unless there is a situation like that, who will say that, you see, I'm not really that great, that guy is great, hum chote mote log hain. Who's going to say that at a time when it's cutthroat and no one has any sympathy for you for being a lower caste, bro? Okay. And that is what actually Dr. Deepak Gupta, I have not read the book as of yet, but it kinds of hints at, based on whatever I've read so far, that where's the rigid hierarchy mapping onto the entire country? Different hierarchies exist in different parts of the country. Is it even fair to call this a hierarchy? That's his argument. Because not all jatis fall in the same position in the hierarchy all across the country.
Fully agreeing with the four honorable Shankaracharyas. So it is critical to know that going forward, it's very good to know the theology and the history and the past. Going forward, should we believe in birth-based occupation, yes or no? A very clear answer would be required. Going forward, it's very good to know the theology and the history and the past. Going forward, should we believe in birth-based occupation, yes or no? A very clear answer would be required.
Good. These are the point blank questions I was talking about. This is a very nice way to bring the debate to something substantive.
I am horrified to think that you can say that a Dalit person cannot open a business, or that I cannot join the army. I come from a Baniya background.
Yeah, and here, before finding out what Desai Deepak or Ashish actually says, I think both of them will say, no, that's not what we mean. And therefore, I say these people are not really castes, they just give you castes vibes. I'm looking forward now. Let's see what they say.
Some Brahmin person cannot open a business or cannot work on the farm. I think it should be all allowed to be mixed. I think a large part of keeping this system was rural violence, was a feudal society,
right,
and was endemic threats. And above all, it was about women not having their own agency, having their education, or being financially independent. Because women were not financially independent, they could not actually go out and do intercaste marriages, which, according to some honorable people, leads to bestiality. Again, I can put that link on there. So the question is, if there are a lot of people who are clearly Hindus who do not agree with this mindset, then we have to think
of yes. If intercaste marriage is bestiality, then to bhai, you are pretty casteist. Not fully casteist, but yeah, you are there 50-60%. Because, and I'm saying that the people who formulated these stuff back then, the rishis, the Brahmins, whoever, they were not evil people. They were saying, or at least, I guess they were wrong to codify it, but that's the job of a bureaucrat. But in the end, even that's inevitable, because again, if you take the lens of looking at caste as status groups, that is exactly what happens today. कोई भी अपने caste के बाहर आज भी शादी नहीं कर रहा है, unless there are some people who are just that much in love or just want to piss their fathers off. In those kinds of situations, it sometimes happens. But mainly, no matter what your cosplaying jati name, you always marry in your status group, because yours. How the fuck are you even going to talk to your husband or wife? They have to be from your exclusive group, and they have to have your specific consumption patterns. नहीं तो कैसे, मतलब बात क्या करोगे? How will you hang out? Sex के अलावा तो कुछ करना है, वो कैसे होगा? And specifically in terms of almost semi-forced arranged marriages that take place based on caste names of earlier days, ancient periods, there this actually happens. Because there people are actually marrying outside their caste, which should not happen. The marriage gets fucked. Okay. Because let's say someone from caste X, brought up in an urban setting, or who has lived in a city for 10-15 years, is being forced to marry someone theoretically from their caste who lives in a village. They are not from the same status anymore. That's not what those rishis meant when they said that marry in this caste and that caste. Am I casteist for having friends only from the Brahmin, Boidya or Kaista castes? How is that happening? It's no mystery, because the way my upbringing and education was, because of studying in a convent, my consumption patterns ended up becoming the same as Kolkata's Brahmins, Boidyas and Kaistos. I don't have a single Shaha friend. I don't have a single friend who is not Brahmin, Boidya, Kaisto. I have never dated someone who is not Brahmin, Boidya, Kaisto, except one girl whose surname I can't really figure out. I think she might be SC or ST. But that's absolutely an exception. How is that happening? Because status groups, bro. Because consumption patterns. यहाँ पे, so therefore you can't follow past caste names. That will be just cosplaying, fancy dress competition.
Authority in a much bigger, smaller subset of Brahmanism, not Hinduism or Dharma per se. I'll just end up making a point about theodicy. Theodicy is the problem of evil in religion. So, the claim of this is, because you did good karma in your last births, you ended up being born a Brahmin, for example. You did bad karma, you ended up being born a Dalit, for example, and whatever in the middle. And they say, well, theodicy is a problem. Hinduism is one of the pure religions that solves it. And I think that's a beautiful point. But it is important to understand that theodicy need not lead to caste-based birth. For example, if I have an accident in going outside of this podcast and I die, I can think that because I did something wrong in my previous lives, this is the karma accumulated, which I am paying for. But it need not apply to birth-based jati and varna at a limited point, even if you go with accumulated karma. So I'll stop there, and I just want to say one small thing. I would like to take back what I have said, but I would like to first hear, whenever we go through it in a formalized, structured manner, that whether there should be birth-based occupation going forward, yes or no. Thank you.
Yes, Aftudni, but no one sees that really, right? Maybe in some Western Indian or North Indian states that doesn't happen in Bengal, right? That's not what I did, right? Raised in a fully progressive liberal commie family. How did it end up being the same fucking thing? That's where you see Max Weber was the rightest of all. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Who's the only one who understood caste of them all? Max Weber.
We'll come to questions and counter questions in the next segment. So, in fact, we can introduce a 5-minute section where Harsh and Ashish can just hash it out. Or a 10-minute segment where Harsh and Ashish can hash it out and we can grab our popcorn.
Yes.
But in the meantime, Ravi ji, please, your opening remarks.
Okay. I hope I'm audible to everyone. Yeah, take it.
Yeah, you are. Please.
So the primary thing is about genesis of caste. I would use the term.
Who is this guy? No one knows him.
I am someone who doesn't prescribe to the view that caste as it exists now or the caste problem came up only because of European interference into India.
Nice.
I mean, Jati was not because of Europeans entering into India. Let me not worry about caste now. Because I agree to an extent with what Arihant stated. But at the same time, the other view that, there was Varna Vyavastha that degenerated into Jati Vyavastha, or that initially Varna was open to everyone. It's as though every kid was, given an aptitude test, and then it was decided that X kid will be Brahman, Y kid will be Kshatriya or whatever. So this is some view which is there. Maybe as an answer to the claim that the early Vedic religion was casteist or whatever. I don't agree with that view either. What I say is that you have to first understand history. You have to be factual. You have to look without any bias at the old texts, at the practices, and whatever scientific literature is available with us. So the first thing, where did the Jati come from? Jatis were actually endogamous tribes. So I'm quoting a research.
What all Jati is endogamous tribes? So specific tribes को specific काम दिया गया. Maybe specific tribes specialized in specific jobs. So was there a point when all Jatis were basically just endogamous tribes? It would make sense.
Paper written by Arun Kumar and others in 2012, published in PLOS. So what it says, it is specifically about Tamil Nadu tribes, actually. So the so-called Brahmins' entrance into Tamil Nadu was never before 1000 BCE. That is the accepted.
Anand, if you are saying this, then why are you being more harsh on Harsh than Ashish Dhar?
Statement by, be it Westerners or anyone else for that matter. You don't see any Brahminical culture in the Tamil lands before 1000 BCE or at max perhaps 1200 BCE. There is nothing on archaeology, which is a fact. So this paper states that though the Brahmins must have entered Tamil Nadu only 3000 years ago, 6000 years ago, Jatis were already in existence. These tribes, like, various tribal communities who are forming various Jatis in Tamil Nadu now, each of them were endogamous. And to use the, specific paraphrasing, they found strong evidence for genetic structure associated primarily with the mode of subsistence. In other words, fathers passed down their occupation and the way of life to their sons.
Right.
So what I see is that we had too many endogamous tribes. India was a huge nation. There were too many endogamous tribes. The Vedic culture spread from its heartland of Saraswati civilization to the other parts. If you talk about genetic admixture, which Arihant mentioned, the same paper also mentions that the admixture happened between 2300 BCE to the 1st century of CE, which is exactly the time when the desiccation of Saraswati started. People moved out from their homelands to the other parts of India. And wherever they went, they started spreading the Vedic culture. This is where admixture of various genetic materials between the different peoples has happened. And by the 1st century, everything was once again fossilized. It is a period of some 2000 years. Anyway, this is the basic stuff. Now, coming to the point of Jati, what has happened is all these individual endogamous tribes, they were taken as is and where is into the Hindu mainstream. We accepted their deities as Kuladevatas. We accepted their rituals. We accepted their practices.
Yeah.
They were given a space within the Hindu altar.
Yes.
And they were given a way to follow their occupation, which was already in existence.
Right.
There was a stratified society. Dharma did not try to destroy anything.
Right.
We don't have a practice of going and bulldozing things and putting something new over there. We accepted whatever was there. We just added a superstructure over it.
Yes.
That's it. We brought them under a single.
You have about 5 minutes, Ravi.
10 minutes. So
1 minute.
Coming to the medieval era, the belief is that casteism apparently created trouble for everyone. You have to keep something in mind. There were no jati-based revolts in India, large-scale revolts, unlike serf revolts in Europe. There's a reason for it. Though there were some restrictions on certain jatis which followed some professions, they were compensated in a different manner. I don't say it was right, I don't say it was wrong, but look at it for what it was, learn it, and then speak about it. The compensation being that, for example, I'll give a specific example in Chengalpattu district of Tamil Nadu. The records are available even till 18th century. The so-called Harijans, they were not required to pay any taxes. They were not required to pay even their house tax. The backyard of their house was much, much bigger than others, where they could cultivate vegetables and stuff for themselves, not pay any tax. And finally, they were actually paid maniums, which were not subsidies, but actually right. They had a right over the village produce or the services.
Please.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take some comments now. Wait. So Gravity was asking if Chotolog is a casteist slur in Bengal. It isn't anymore. At some point, it definitely was, which is why it's the opposite of Bhadralok. It's Chotolog. It's not anymore. Wait, there was another one I wanted to take. Where's Parakram Divya's comment? Where did it go? Parakram. Yeah, he was asking mainly that what's wrong if someone feels an affinity towards their own caste, community, etc. Yeah, that's a very ambiguous question because we have to get into what do you mean by caste. If you mean caste in the traditional sense, then yes, it can work sometimes, and it won't work in a situation in a place where capitalism has disrupted the system. So see where it works. Why are Brahmins, Vaidhas, Kaistos of Kolkata forever working with each other in every profession and succeeding at it? Okay, so who's going to stop them? They're not doing that because of casteism. They're doing it because of the status they inherited from when those names actually meant anything. But at the same time now, why am I having an affinity only towards Brahmins, Vaidhas and Kaistos? Because my status has jumped to their status. अब क्या करें? हमारा एक्सक्लूसिव ग्रुप चेंज हो गया है, हमारा कंजम्पशन पैटर्न सेम हो गया है, अब तो कुछ नहीं हो सकता है. तो if you are saying that you have affinity towards some people just because of their surnames, I don't know how you make friends with that, but if they are your relatives or people you grew up with, then obviously, I mean, that doesn't even require caste technically.
Okay, if you want to finish making your point in 5 seconds, you can. I don't want to cut you short.
Jairasi, it's a very good thing that you pointed out. It's actually important to remember. In Bengali, when we say the word lok, it's basically an application of the Arabic Farsi word log, look, etc. Okay, in every other Sanskrit-based language, Sanskrit-adjacent language in India, loka means location, locus, loka. Okay, ihalok, paralok, etc. Even that's used in Shuddha Bangla as well. But when we say lok colloquially, it means people, and that has come from Arabic.
No, okay. My thing is that very simple. Jativada, as it is seen now, as either it was a great evil or there was nothing which existed as Jativada. Neither of the versions right. It did exist.
Exactly, Boishalidhi. I won't be able to be friends with a vernacular Brahmin from rural mafiosul areas. Actually, no one from any caste can be my friend from the villages of Bengal, because we don't share the same consumption pattern. Maybe if we met for one evening and discussed politics, yes, but you won't be hanging out with me every evening. What the fuck are we going to talk about? Your upbringing was completely different. Your tastes in everything is completely different from mine. Hence, Bhadralok caste, Brahmin Boito caste doesn't apply to the entirety of Bengal. Bhadralok means Brahmins Boito castes of only and only Kolkata.
But it had a benevolent form, and it also had certain restrictions. Look at it for what it is. First, be descriptive without pushing your opinions upon what happened in the past.
Okay. Just before we go to Sai, I would like to just answer one question. A couple of people, especially one Miss Usha, is asking me over and over again, and she said she won't stop till I answer her, saying, how can we have a panel discussion on caste and caste discrimination without representation from the oppressed community, which is scheduled caste and scheduled tribes or the Dalit community? I want to tell Ushaji that this is just the first step that Op India has taken in discussing certain contentious
अगली बार एक शाह को ही बुला लीजिएगा.
Issues within Hinduism. This is an issue which we are introspecting on, and we are trying to reach a consensus only because there was a huge discussion that already happened on Twitter, and we are just trying to formalize that discussion in this debate. I assure you that going forward, we will have representation from all communities and all people, and we will carry forward this conversation in the coming months. So enjoy this debate, and I assure you we'll have following debates where your grouse will be taken.
2 minutes to make some of their points, because I suspect even Harsh had a couple of points to make. Okay, so here's what I would suggest. Initially, we had proposed 3 minutes for rebuttals and 3 minutes for responses from each party. So maybe we give them 5 minutes, where they use 2 minutes for the points that they have left and the rest for the rebuttals. You get 5 minutes further, however you choose to use it, but that is the time that you get for further points as well as rebuttals. I have just one point to make, and it's important. See, the thing is, I don't want this particular panel discussion of the session to be accused of elitist discussion of caste without inclusion of the oppressed community. Okay.
I was about to take VXT's comment on this, and I was about to say that Nupur Sharma fell for it, and now I guess Desai Deepak is also falling for that trap. But VXT is pointing out here that the argument that if you're not a woman, you can't have an opinion on abortion. And Indians of yesteryears, our ancestors did not give a fuck about those arguments. भाई मैंने पढ़ा है इस बारे में, मैंने रिगरस स्टडी किया है. मैं और मेरे ही तरह कोई किसी के बीच में डिबेट होगा. तुम उस ग्रुप का रिप्रेजेंटेटिव हो तो लौड़े तुमको क्या पता हो गया. तुम एक स्पेसिफिक काम करते हो, इसलिए तुम इस टॉपिक के डिबेट में कैसे हकदार बन गए. How did you become qualified for this debate? How did you become qualified for this argument or this conversation? What's the connection between your inherited identity and you being qualified enough to talk about it? Unless it's just my memoir, personal diary sort of a thing, that my life as a person of this caste. Okay, like Ibram X Kendi. तो बंदे का जिंदगी का पहला बुक है एक मेमोर. किसी को पता नहीं है वो कौन है, सिर्फ ब्लैक है. अपब्रिंगिंग के बारे में थोड़ा डायरी लिख दिया, बन गया फेमस. Barack Obama became president only because he's black. No one other than Barack Obama can become president with that kind of experience, being a junior senator. So, yeah, I don't like that stuff. Representation होगा भाई. बीजेपी की तरफ से तो होता ही है, एकेडेमिया में भी होने का अब थोड़ा बहुत बात उठ रहा है, but it's not going to be that fruitful because क्वालिटी का इश्यूज थोड़ा रहेगा, क्योंकि उनके पास वो प्रिविलेज नहीं था टू गैदर एनफ कल्चरल कैपिटल. अनलेस यू चेंज द रूल्स ऑफ व्हाट इज कल्चरल कैपिटल नाउ, यू से सम 2 + 2 = 5 to help black kids pass their examinations and all. वही होगा हमारे यहाँ भी, अगर सिर्फ रिप्रेजेंटेशन फॉर रिप्रेजेंटेशन सेक रहे एक डिबेट में.
One, that's not the intention at all. It's a specific reason. To be honest and to be blunt, the genesis of this particular session is what has happened over the last 48 hours or more than that on Twitter. And since that discussion involved people, specific individuals, those individuals, along with a few more others, are being given an opportunity to thrash it out, because I certainly believe that this is an issue. Feminism, caste, and environment are 3 issues which are central to the civilizational debate, because these are the sticks that are being used against Hinduism by the other side. And therefore, this particular discussion was
गुड प्रॉम, तुम अपने फंदे में फंस गए. देखो, सैंपल ही लेंगे, सैंपल ही होता है. सैंपल इज नॉट द एंटायर research article or the conclusion or the argument. Sample is just that, it's a sample. I will my quality of arguments will be based on what kind of diverse samples I have learned from, but that sample cannot be the cannot be my equivalent in a debate. Then it's just sample.
important so that people can let steam off in a civilized fashion without having to resort to a Twitter war or continue with it, because at the end of the day, that forum does not accommodate any kind of nuanced discussion. But this is not in any manner an attempt to exclude the people who are meant to be on this particular discussion, if I say so with a lot of respect, and with respect to all of these participants, and including myself. There are better informed people on the question of caste and on the issue of caste who are entitled to speak on this particular issue. Therefore, I don't think any of us, at least I can't pass off as remotely qualified to speak on the subject, which is why I have chosen consciously to stay out of this particular debate, but to only act as a moderator. So a clarification, I think this is a beginning, and we will certainly continue with this discussion, because I think this is only going to start a few more questions. So I think, why don't we go back to Arihant now? So 5 minutes each to each participant, however you choose to use it.
Good question, Pram. You disagree with me, but you are sending the conversation in a very constructive direction. The problem is, we are not talking about just experiences. We are not. This is not a therapy session. This is not a group therapy discussion that we are witnessing here. We are here to listen to some scholars on what is the nature of caste, how to solve a problem, if at all there is. We are not here to discuss what was Ashish Dhar's upbringing like, what was Desai Deepak's life like, what was Madhusudan's life like. So why should someone else be invited just to tell their life story? What's the point of this debate or this discussion? It's not individual experiences. It's their knowledge on this particular issue. And knowledge on this particular issue doesn't come just from your upbringing. That's going to be a very horseshit discussion, because how much of, let's say, quality of an argument can depend on just your personal experiences. It's all going to be just trivia.
But you get 5 minutes to basically address any further points that you have, and then questions that you may want to pose to any other panelist.
And please mention the panelists so that we can then go to the panelists that you have posed the question to.
Okay, so one point I wanted to make, but I couldn't, was that the identities of Varna were very fluid. That is my reading from whatever I have read.
It was not very fluid, but it was fluid. And whether it was very fluid or not, it wasn't being, let's say, codified into law by some authority. It was just that there were not enough jobs to get into in a situation where you could leave your parents' profession or your father's profession and get into a different job completely without any lineage-based guidance and stuff. For those reasons, it was not that commonplace, but it did happen whenever it could happen.
And we have so many examples. And Raviji, I would like to, just few examples. We know Mauryas, Chalukyas, Rashtrakutas, all these kings, weren't they Shudras, these castes or these families?
Maurya caste is disputed.
Families. And when the Guptas were Vaishyas, and Shungas were Brahmana kings. So they also became kings. They did not have, if the system was rigid. I just want to understand your interpretation of this, because my reading is that the identities were not fluid. Some people say that these are exceptions and which prove the rule. But I want to understand.
Nupur Sharma ke boss ne comment kiya wahan pe. Stop reading comments, Nupur.
From you, what is your take on this? Were they, if we have such elite examples from the society, when we are supposed to have the so-called Brahmanical system at its peak, right? We have so many kings from different castes, different varnas, who are becoming kings, who are not just kings. People born in Kshatriya family, they become Brahmanas. People born in Shudras, they are elevated to the highest status. So how prevalent was that? Was it just exception or just also kind of norm? Second, second question that I had, there are so many questions. This is about past. Contemporary discrimination, that is the main crux of the matter.
Right.
How do we solve that issue?
Yeah.
So Ashish said that it's it is not. He seems to be in disagreement with the Hindu unity. He had some things to say on that. So I would like more clarification on that. What he means.
Okay, bro, the dispute is that whether he was in fact a lower caste person or not, whether he even existed or not.
Is that Hindu unity impossible to achieve, or I mean, it's okay. We have to be in harmony with each other. The castes have to be harmony with each other. That is our past. But we also face insurmountable challenges in the 21st century from the religions, from the the systems that are unified, that have more population than us, more power, more money power. So all these things, how do you see that? And do we not need Hindu unity? Does not the caste should become a secondary, and Hindu unity should take precedence in form of identity? So these are my two questions to you. Of course, I have a couple of more, so I can take it later. This is more in the sense that the effects of caste discrimination that I have. I want to ask Ashish. So we hear that so many people want to convert to Hinduism, especially Muslims, and the society does not accept those people back into the society. They don't want to the rural system. It's not proper or politically correct to say, but they don't want to marry their daughters into the families which have been converted. So that's a resistance that is coming from that side, and the acceptance is not there. So what is the reason that a Hindu family does not accept a person marrying a Muslim girl, but Muslim family readily accepts a Hindu girl? So I want to understand why that is. Is our society, Hindu society, exclusive, as people say, that this is the reason why we do not accept anyone? We are inward looking people. So I want to understand why is that, and not just Hindu families. We have seen examples of villages or panchayats, excommunicating people who marry a Muslim girl, the Hindu boys. So I want to understand that kind of discrimination, that kind of exclusivity. What is the reason for that, and the reason and the challenges it posed to the we want more people. As the Hindutvawadis would say, we want more and more people to convert back, to spread, become dharmics. So, isn't that a big challenge? Whatever the reason for not accepting a Muslim bride is, isn't that a big challenge to increasing our Hindu followers? So these are my.
Okay. Retro is asking, I've heard rumors that people with Shaha last name are very rich. The scheduled caste Shahas of Kolkata, who used to be alcohol sellers, they were called Shuri Shahas. They are pretty rich. They started becoming rich when they started selling alcohol to the British, as far as I know. And there are pretty some rich ass Shahas in Bangladesh today. Chaudhuris and Shahas are pretty rich. They are the mainly ones who are into business and stuff. So now it depends on which business you are and what kind of entrepreneurial mindset you are in. So my grandfather's generations were petty, small-time gamcha sellers, so we were never rich. So it's usually businessmen who will be generally richer than everyone, but that doesn't mean that anyone doing any business will be rich, right? So in that sense. Wait, another important question here. Rishikesh is asking, is it like multiple tribes is equal to kul or clan? Multiple kul is equal to jat, each having varnas, occupation. Then what led to different castes? No, varnas is not occupation. Varnas and jati don't even map onto each other. It's a forced mapping into varnas. It's very, very almost impossible to map every jati into a varna, into a specific varna. Okay, jatis are a beast of their own. And what led to different castes, different professions, and different degrees of importance of that profession in the society, different degrees of status and honor for that job. Oh yeah, Avtudni is asking, what do you think of the claim that only upper castes used to worship Lord Ram? Same way that it's mainly Brahmins with those castes who are Marxists, but that doesn't mean that there are no lower caste CPIM supporters, right?
Three questions to both of you.
Ashish, would you like to take the questions first, and then we can move ahead?
Yeah, sure. So before I get to the questions, I would like to make a comment that Harsh reached out and said, he said that
VXT, I know that JST doesn't have any strong views against reconversion, because in another discussion with Ashish Dhar on upward only, which we reacted to long time back, he said that if you want to convert back to Hinduism and you don't want to follow the orthodox path, there are so many other options for you, like BAPS and ISKCON and stuff. So join that. All the white people converting to Hinduism, they are not being concerned with these questions. So who cares? Why are you so bothered about Jati in that sense then? So am I bleeding? So based on that interview, at least I know that he doesn't care about this particular aspect.
There were hard feelings on Twitter and all, and I think that we should put it behind us. It happens sometimes in the heat of the argument. So I think we should all move on and not worry
Ashish,
about that.
you'll have to be a bit louder. I think you're not as loud as you can be.
Okay. Is this better now? Okay. So so the first comment that I noted that Harsh made was about the agency of women and women not being independent. This is completely, absolutely contrary to all evidence that I have encountered in my reading of pre-colonial Indian society. And that is why I make the case again and again that people, when they comment on the realities of Jati and Varna, it is important that they first get a clear, reasonable view of what society was like, right? And then, things start falling into place. All of us have been, in some sense, indoctrinated by our education. I don't think anyone on the panel would disagree with that. And therefore, I always, suggest that it should be a thorough reading or maybe a conversation with a scholar or someone who's done a deep study of Indian society, or pre-colonial Indian society. Then we should form our opinions on this. So women not being independent is completely, absolutely off the charts. I don't think that is the case at all. Secondly, the question that I was asked on Twitter, and again, Harsh repeated here, about should there be birth-based occupation? And the point that I have been making again and again is that it is not a moral question at all. This is how a society evolves. There are periods when there is endogamy. There are periods when there is intercaste marriages. There are periods when you have family-linked occupation. There are periods like the Industrial Revolution came. There was a period where, suddenly you had a huge demand from factories and industries, and then the whole nature of society changed. So who am I, or who is Harsh to make that statement, whether it should be there or not? Of course, these things are not imposed. If there is a view that birth-based...
So far, he's obfuscating from a pretty direct point-blank question. Harsh asked him whether you think this should happen or not. He is saying, who are we to decide? अरे तुमको decide करने को बोला है hypothetically अभी इस situation में.
Occupation was imposed on Indian society. That is a false view, and I'll tell you why. One, Raviji made the point about endogamy. And from my reading, like scholars like Dr. David Reich, he's one of the most authoritative sources of genetic studies in the world. And he says that Indian society has been largely endogamous. It consists of small groups of endogamous communities. And this has been so for the last 2,000 to 3,000 years, right? Now, if you go to the Dharmashastras, right? So Dharmashastras acknowledge the existence of different types of marriages, 9 different types of marriages. Of course, there are restrictions and there are allowances, but intercaste marriage is not restricted. Right? It is not a no. And Dharmashastras give you ways to handle these situations, right? So obviously, one, it was happening for which there were rules and regulations how it had to be done. And secondly, despite the sanction of the tradition, Dharmashastras.
Ashish, you'll have to wrap it up in a minute or so, because we can always come back when we're having a free-flowing discussion.
Yeah. So as far as, in spite of the Dharmashastras allowing intercaste marriages, the fact that Indian society chose to be endogamous, largely endogamous, what does that tell you? It is not a Brahminical instruction that they were following.
Fair enough.
It just happened to evolve like that. These are organic choices that...
Right, absolutely.
So therefore, the question of whether there should be birth-based occupation or not is not even a question for me. It is not there right now. And I acknowledge that it is not there. If society changes, and again, in the post-industrial world, if you don't have jobs, and then again, your occupation gets linked with who you are, which family you come from, and your skills get transferred from father to son, then who am I to say that it should not be? So I refuse to pass a moral judgment on that. That is my position.
Nice.
That makes it clear.
Cool.
Do I have time, or should I answer the other question? I answer this later.
Fair enough.
I think we can take it up a little later, because I want everybody to ensure that they get their time in there.
No, Boishalidi. Specific consumption patterns.
So I think we can move on to Harsh. Harsh, in case you want to make further comments or ask questions, please do.
Thank you so much, Nupur, once again. Thank you, Arihant. I've learned a lot from Raviji's comments as well. Very interesting. I actually read that study that the caste actually went from south to north. That's very few people actually know that. So what I acknowledge what Ashish has said. And in my future comments, what I'll do is I will not personalize it on Ashish. I would say my personal view is it is easy to take a normative view about what should be.
Jairasi, yes, Kushal would get pissed off with him for obfuscating it, taking a 2-3 minute long route to answer what seems to be a pretty straightforward one. But I don't know why he needed to give that apologia or even the gigantic explanation. He just could have said that if it happens on its own, I have no problem. Even the Indian law today is not saying that you cannot get into your father's profession. So if you want to get into it like it always happened. But at some point it did get codified. Today it's not codified anymore. The question that Harsh basically asked was, do you want it to be codified today or not? And after a 4-minute long route, he says, no, I don't think it needs to be codified, basically. But he even doesn't say this directly. So yeah, Kushal would be pissed off with him for obfuscating. But the answer in the end is fine.
Ashish has decided not to. I'll leave it at that. Fine. So let's see. The idea that women have had agency in the past, I think it's laughable. I think Ashish himself would agree that he has made an assertion in his 5 minutes. Admittedly, he did not have much time. He did not give any reference or link. I've also read about the medieval times, and there were all kinds of restrictions on widow remarriage and so on and so forth. I don't think that it would be fair to say that women actually had any kind of agency compared to modern times in earlier times. But, once again, I'm also open-minded. I could be wrong. See, the larger issue in this case is very simple. I'm not saying this. It's that what we are defining as, that the word Hindu is not there in any of our Shastras. In any of our earlier Shastras, the word Hindu is not there. The word Hindu obviously was a geographical identity. It came from the word Sindhu, and the Persians could not pronounce so and all that, and it became Hindu, right? And therefore, and later on, then what happened is, as the number of converts, Islamic converts, increased in India, it became all Indians minus the Abrahamic religions, because then Christians also started increasing in numbers. So since the word Hindu is not there, and it's kind of a negative identity in terms of count, even in our sense.
Shikhar, no caste certificate in the country means anything regarding history. It was all opportunism. Incentive structure घूम गया, immediately सब के सब दौड़ने लगे. Maisho caste of Bengal rejected the OBC certificate. I think they are going to be included, I hear these days. But when they were offered, they said, no, we are not lower caste. Who the fuck are you to tell us we are lower caste? But some dumbasses thought, oh, they are so far removed from Brahmins, maybe they're lower caste. How about you take a certificate, bro? Come, you do want a certificate, bro? They said, no, we don't want the lower caste card. And everyone else did. And people like my family fell through the cracks. Rich Shahas from Kolkata who sold alcohol are scheduled castes of all people. Rich Shahas in Bangladesh who did not have to leave all of their property and come to Kolkata are rich. The Shahas like us who are poor, don't have cultural capital, at the same time faced partition, quit all their property, whatever the fuck they had anyway, which they didn't really have much to begin with. We don't have economic capital, we don't have cultural capital, and we don't have caste certificate, SC certificate, even though we are the same Shahas as other Shahas. Lol.
Still very recently, when we did not have an option for other or atheist or so on and so forth, non-believer, Hindu was the negative bucket in which everybody was put. So my point is, if people want to say there is a certain adhikara, that there is a certain belief system, even if it is not enforced, I am interested in saying what is the morality of this going forward. I think history and theology is very interesting. But going forward, if people want to say that there is a question of authority for this system, then they should say it's a question of authority for the subset of the Jati, people who believe in.
Fair enough. But Ashish sir already kind of answered this, but he obfuscated so much, I guess Harsh didn't get it. He said that if it happens, who cares?
Birth-based Jatis, who I do not, in my worldview, for whatever that matters, it may not matter at all in larger scheme of things, I am not excommunicating at all. However, if you go by certain comments, I'm not attributing it to Ashish. If you go by certain comments, it seems to say that, if you do not believe in this, you are not a Hindu. If you do not believe in this, you are aapka bahishkar ho raha hai, you are being excommunicated. It is true that there were pratiloma marriages and all that, intercaste marriages. The Dharm Shastras had 9 or so kind of marriages.
बहिष्कार करने का कोई mechanism ही तो नहीं है. तू लौड़े कौन है मुझे बहिष्कार करने वाला? तू कर बहिष्कार. मैं फिर भी काल भैरव अष्टकम चांट भी करूंगा, उसके ऊपर अपना वर्जन का गाना भी बनाऊंगा.
But the problem was, if you were marrying across caste, there's a clear hierarchy there. I think one of the fascinating talks that Sai gave was at IIT BHU. I think somebody asked him a question on caste, and I think he did not maybe did not have much time. But in one of the things he said, caste is horizontal; it was never vertical, hierarchical. And it might be true for the middle castes. It might be true in terms of cultural diversity, but at the very top and the very bottom, I'm sure it looked very different, especially at the very bottom. I'm a bit surprised that Raviji is saying that it is a benign system whereby the Dalits actually got benefits. If you're living outside the village, anyways, land is less valuable there. I mean, this really sounds, again, I'm not saying that this is Raviji's intentions. I'm simply saying that many of us have biases to say that Dalits were somehow benefited in the system when just recently, some girl was not even allowed to be cremated in the village in Uttar Pradesh by Thakurs. And then we see it all in Haryana and Uttar Pradesh, even in Tamil Nadu, that people have to go put the body from a bridge into the water below because they cannot cross upper caste lands with the body.
Yes. और ये बंद तब होगा जब स्टेट खुद कास्ट रिकॉग्नाइज करना बंद कर देगी और लेबर लॉ का माँ का भोसरा बना के सारे किसान नेताओं को 5 साल के लिए हाउस अरेस्ट में डाल के पिज्जा और बर्गर खिला के फ्री मार्केट कैपिटलिज्म लाएगी, तब ये बंद होगा.
We have not been able to give dignity and death to our people, and here we are being ambivalent. Let us be very honest. We are not explicitly saying this is wrong. Now, I agree with a significant point that Ashish mentioned. A lot of this is economics. Per capita. About 1 minute, right? Yeah. So, for example, historically, we had about $500 per capita income, depending on how you adjust for inflation across the world. India is right now, in nominal dollar terms, $2,000 per capita. America, $60,000, right? I think somebody mentioned about what the economists take would be on it. I think as you urbanize, automatically this thing further and further dissolves. So, I mean, a large part of this discussion actually becomes beyond the point. But what is interesting is going forward, does the point of view that Shastra ordained birth-based jati, even if it is not followed, does it have certain prestige in our worldview, in our Hindu dharmic worldview? Does it have certain prestige? And if it does have certain prestige, there is no point saying there is propaganda against us, people are misunderstanding. Yeah, they will obviously misrepresent to some point, but there is no smoke without fire. We have to first make the problems in our own system go away before we constantly play victim. So I am here saying that if there is any Shastra which says there must be birth-based occupation, I am a full Hindu, I'm a full Dharmic, and I totally reject it. And I dare anybody to tell me that I'm less Hindu or Dharmic than them. And just one last point, 20 seconds.
Harsh is born and raised in Kolkata. His wife is a Bangal.
Rihan's point is very interesting. If we want to be a quote-unquote missionary religion again, if we want to expand and not just play defense, see, caste may have had certain values when we play defense. I'm not saying there are not nuances in our history, but if we want to play offense, a very different strategy is required. You now have a civilization that is transforming into a nation through a state, through one common independent democratic state. And now we can have a different worldview because we can afford to be aggressive going. I'll leave it.
That is also just one thing I would also like to add in this, what Harsh said, that whether you also support the missionary zeal, acquiring that zeal to acquire new followers, is that allowed in the Shastras? So please address that also.
Irrelevant.
Okay, so I think that point has been made. We'll go to Ravi ji, and then Ashish, if in 30 seconds or so you want to ask somebody a question, you can do that, because I think most of your time went in answering a question. So in case you want to ask somebody a question.
Oh my God, Obhagi Shorgo we had in our ICSE Bengali syllabus. Very harrowing experience. Obhagi Shorgo and another story. Those were the only 2 stories I did not like in that book. It was selected, the collection for our syllabus was made by Navonita Devshane. Oh no, Mahashweta Devi. So I forgot even that.
Question, you can do that in about 30 seconds after Raviji makes his points.
No, just a second. I don't think that should be given to Ashish without permission of other panelists, because you're giving 30 seconds to one particular participant. So please ask.
I'm fine with it.
I don't want
okay, you know what? Then great. So then Raviji will speak, and then Sai and I will ask 2 questions each to each panelist, and then we will throw the floor open for a free-flowing discussion. Raviji, please.
I'll first answer Arihan's question, because that is very close to what I wanted to say. So yes, Jati was set in stone. They were endogamous tribes which became part of Hinduism. Now, Varna Vyavastha was actually fluid. Jatis en masse could go up and down. See, the movement was not based on single individual. As I said, there was no aptitude test which was kept for these kids, and whoever passed it at 100% got one Varna, 30% got another Varna, or whatever. No, it did not work like that. What happened was, particular Jatis by themselves, they could go up and down. There are examples of Jatis which have gone up. Caste is one recent example. They are now treated as Kshatriya. The Rajbanshis of Kuch Behar.
I had a Caste girlfriend once, and she casually said, "We are Kshatriya Caistas," and I said, "No, you are not. You were helping people zamindars run the business, or you became zamindars after you got land and stuff, and you were many other things, but definitely not Kshatriyas." And few days later, she says that she comes from a family of Mahajans. तो भाई यहाँ पे क्षत्रिय कहाँ से आ गया? उसके भी पहले ब्राह्मण्स के साथ जब पहली बार आए थे बंगाल में, तब क्षत्रिय थे, लड़ाई कर रहे थे ब्राह्मण्स के लिए, कायस्थ।
Panchanan Burma, he claimed that they had Kshatriya ancestry. At least in the past 1000 years, they were not known to have even underwent Upanayana Samskara, but they claim Kshatriya ancestry. He brought the Brahmins, he got Upanayana for everyone. Now they are indeed identified as Kshatriya by everyone in the so-called Brahminical religion, as you know, someone might call it.
Raviji, I'll just interject so that the point is a little clearer, because even I couldn't understand. So when you say that they have been accepted as such, who is the authority that is accepting either their upward movement or their downward movement? This is what even I would like to understand.
See, in case of the Indic civilization, it is always the majority of the others. It is never a case of one pope.
Yes, in terms of specific horrifying atrocities, like not letting people, let's say, killing people, violence and stuff, that kind of stuff though was happening at the hands of someone against someone or the other. But everything that's seemingly discriminatory against Shudras cannot be considered to be a historical occurrence for just those days, because let's say today, why can't everyone be in the front seats of a cricket match? Why are the poor people at the back? Isn't that discrimination? That's pretty grammatically discrimination, right? गरीब हो पीछे से देखना पड़ेगा, ये क्या what a monstrous way to organize a society. So since equality is an impossibility, someone or the other can always show discrimination anywhere,
declaring that these people have to be accepted as Kshatriya now. The point is, if you say the majority of the people around are okay to accept them as Kshatriya, fair enough, and that has happened throughout the history. There are examples where people have come down the Jati scale, or Varna scale rather, entire sets of people.
Good question, Shikhar. Jatis hardly fall into anywhere in the Varnas. Okay, mapping Jatis onto Varna is done forcibly to suit some narrative or the other in some points of time. Most Jatis almost at no point have anything to do with Varnas. वो कनेक्शन ही एक घपला है, एक करप्शन है, वहां पे कुछ shenanigans है. So yes, if some Caistas ruled places like Assam and Kashmir, how did they get the name Caista in the first place? If someone ends up becoming a king or a big shot or a muscle man, yes, they become Kshatriyas. But that's not the beginning and end of the word Caista. That's not their main job. Of course, they changed Varnas. And therefore, some Caistas can be Kshatriyas.
For example, the Gonds, they were most probably treated as Kshatriya. In fact, the way we see in their inscriptions from the early medieval era, they were definitely Kshatriyas. But unfortunately, post their defeat by the Muslims, they were forced into forests. They became proper forest dwellers. They could not do what their ancestors did for occupation, and they came down the ladder. Same with the Mewari Rajputs who left on caravans because Mewar became a part of the Mughal Empire to a slight extent. So they also lost their Kshatriya or the Rajput status. And even in the very obscure past, you have an example of an entire royal clan being converted into Brahmins by Maharshi of the Bhrigu clan, because that clan was supposed to be killed by another king, and to protect them, he converted their Varna.
About 1 minute.
Yeah.
I said you have about 1 minute. Yeah.
So
ये कैसा ब्राह्मण कैसा बर्थ बेस्ड सिस्टम है जहाँ पे बच्चा ना अपने मम्मी के प्रोफेशन में जा रही है ना तो अपने पापा के प्रोफेशन में जा रहा है? How is that possible?
So this movement is something which has always happened. Now when you talk about killing Jati, see there are two different aspects here. One is about occupation and Jati. It doesn't exist now. It is not going to exist in the near future, as I see it. Perhaps in a post-industrial world, it may come back. I don't know, and no one is going to impose it on the society. But Jatis per se, whether they can be destroyed, there is a question. And I feel it is tough to destroy Jati completely, because most of the Hindu rituals, they are Jati based. Every Jati has its own specific rituals. When you marry into a particular family, you also marry into their rituals, their traditions, and their customs. You cannot deny that. So if you're going to destroy everything, what are you going to replace it with? I don't know. So I don't really see a way by which Jati can be destroyed. Finally, I think it was Harsh who asked me some question. Harsh, can you please repeat it?
No, I did not ask a question. I made a comment, Raviji. I said that I am a bit taken aback by the insinuation, if not explicitly mentioned, that Dalits were somehow better off in this system of Jati Varna because they got some more land outside of the villages, or they did not pay some taxes. And it is somewhat similar to the claim that women were very well off, because I can again quote you the Shankaracharya Puri and what he mentioned about women, but I will not do that.
I don't know whether you understand it. Anyway, Nupur, can I have 30 seconds? Do I have some time?
If other panelists don't mind, because your time is essentially up. Are other panelists okay with it? All right, everybody is okay with it. So sure, Raviji, go ahead.
Okay, so here's the answer. The question about Benin situation was in comparison with the serfs of Europe or the post-British situation in India. It is not whether, it's not a normative question. As I said, it is comparison. And in comparison, the situation was better, which is why there were no serf revolts-like situation in India, because these people, for all their restrictions, also had certain benefits out of it. It was a system which was set up together by the people and not mere.
Yeah, that I agree with. I'm in agreement with you about comparing with Western Europe. I'm in agreement.
That's what I meant to say.
All right. So I think we've all made all the panelists have made their initial remarks and asked each other questions within the 5 minutes allotted. Sai, I think now we can move to asking moderator questions.
Ashish is yet to answer my 2 questions. So
Ashish
I think one was asked by Harsh also, so that is also remaining, right?
This seems like a very low IQ debate. All of them are blind people trying to touch each other in a dark room.
Okay, I think are all panelists okay with Ashish getting 2-3 minutes more? Okay, Ashish, please answer. You're the all questions.
I'm privileged right here. Okay, so one, before I go to the other questions again about women, the status of women in India. We have so many names that we can rattle.
Ashish, I will send my questions because I think you should focus on Aryan's questions. Otherwise, you'll get more time to do all of them.
Right. I'll just finish this one because this is important. Whether you have Gargi, whether you have Apala, whether you have the warrior Chitrangada, you have the matrilineal transmission, that is the property rights through women in Kerala. You have Manusmriti, which talks about respect for women, serving pregnant women even before the guests. You have this custom of sharing 1/4 of your property with your unmarried sisters. The brothers are supposed to do that. So this is a custom. You have the instance of Adi Shankaracharya finally getting defeated in debate by a woman, not some great pandita. So you can easily make an estimate of the kind of learning that particular woman, an ordinary, and it is particularly important here that she was an ordinary housewife, right? Not some queen. And artisan women, they held large tracts of land. So what is the basis of the claim that women did not have? What Harsh is doing is that he is basically applying the lens of presentism on the customs of that age and then making all these claims, while these bare facts are begging to be explained. So he can come back to me with
Ashish, once he's done, you respond.
Yeah, I'll just respond in 15 seconds. So once again, just like I told Raviji, I am ready to immediately concede the situation was better for women compared to, say, Europe at the same time. My claim is very different. My claim is women's position then, despite all the glorious exceptions you mentioned, and I totally acknowledge all of them, was not as good as it is now. It may have been further exacerbated in the.
Why is Ashish even disagreeing with this particular claim?
I'm not even ready to concede that. But even before that time, they were not as good as today. I'll just leave the claim at that. So
how the fuck can it be?
Your point of presentism is actually right. Your point of presentism is right. I am comparing it to the present only. I'll leave it there.
Can I make a point? Both of you can
What's the disagreement here?
Are we applying present moral standards to what was a completely different?
That's what
no. So I'll just answer because.
But majority women scholars kahan pe? 3 to.
Arihant just also asked me the same thing, Nupur. Is it fair? I'm not saying it's about fair or not. I'm saying this system today is better. And by the way, this system today is where we do not follow birth-based occupation. Maybe a coincidence, may not be a coincidence. I'm not saying that it is fair to compare or not. I'm simply saying it is better. And by the way, the social realities are moving in another direction. That is all I'll say.
No, so I think that's a serious claim because first you're saying that you are not.
What did Harsh do? Oh my
and then
God.
you're passing a value judgment of better. So that is a logical contradiction.
No, I am comparing to the present.
Why did he make this point? Arey bhai, birth-based occupation chala gaya, isliye women's position has become better. How could Harsh say this? Why did he bring this up? He isn't even making this point overtly.
Not fair or not. I'm saying this system today is better. And by the way, this system today is where we do not follow birth-based occupation. Maybe a coincidence, may not be a coincidence. I'm not saying that it is fair to compare or not. I'm simply saying it is better. And by the way, the social realities are moving in another direction. That is all I'll say.
No, so I think that's a serious claim, because first you're saying that you are not making a comparison, and then you're passing a value judgment of better. So that is a logical contradiction.
No, I am comparing to the present. I am comparing to the present. I'm not comparing.
Right. Okay. So that is one. And the other fact is that you're looking at it through the minuscule, your sample size of women around you, and you're not going into the villages. You're not looking at the oppressed classes, for example. You're not looking at their condition today. And that
I can say the same about your historical examples. I can say the same thing.
No, I have given you examples of artisan women who were Shudras who owned large tracts of land. I can dig out the reference from where I'm making this.
And we today have female billionaires. So
yeah, so that's fine. I'm not saying that today women are not, but I'm talking about
Shudras
who made the claim that they were not doing well. I'm not talking about Brahmin women only or Kshatriya women. I'm talking about Shudras, the artisans who owned lands, large tracts of land. They were rich. And so, I don't know where that claim comes from. So I'll go to the next one, which is Arihant's questions. The question of Hindu unity versus harmony.
This is a sort of an Ankit Shah type of history reading. If the woman owned that land, what was her husband doing? Husband ne bola, हाँ, chill. तुम ही सब संभाल लो, हम chill करते हैं.
So Arihant, unity as such is basically an imposition of one standard, monoculture, on the entire lot of Hindus in this country, right?
I think that might be a stretch. But what Aniket is pointing out here, you claimed untouchability doesn't exist in Bengal. Do you know the Das / Charmakar were not allowed to enter a particular temple in West Bengal for past 200? Yeah, but yes, it is true, but it's also an absolute exception. Casteism exists in Bengal in other ways, but not in the conventional way. This is an example of a conventional example of untouchability existing as well, but it's an absolute exception. And which is why it's being talked about only now, when finally even the right-wing ruling party is talking about Dalits all the time. अगर ये उतना significant होता तो आज तक कॉमीज ने इसको हटा दिया नहीं होता. कॉमीज इतने सारे दलित स्कॉलर्स प्रोड्यूस किए हैं, आज तक किसी ने इसके बारे में बोला काहे नहीं, क्यों, कैसे नहीं हुआ? Because it's an exception.
When I say harmony, you can just picture what happened.
Okay, now the claim that Ashish sir made here, how accurate is that? Does unity mean one standard of something? I don't see how, especially not in the caste context, because especially in the Savarkarite way, what aspect of this Hindutva unity in the Savarkarite way imposes a certain standard on you, unless the standard is that you don't want to intermingle with so-called lower castes from ancient jatis in the cosplaying sense. That's the only standard that's being maintained or imposed, really. I guess in that sense, then, yeah. So these are the kinds of people who would have filed an FIR against Savarkar when he was alive. Let's see what his argument is.
That they were not doing well. I'm not talking about Brahmin women only or Kshatriya women. I'm talking about Shudras, the artisans who owned lands, large tracts of land. They were rich. And so, I don't know where that claim comes from. So I'll go to the next one, which is Arihant's questions. The question of Hindu unity versus harmony. So Arihant, unity as such is basically an imposition of one standard, monoculture, on the entire lot of Hindus in this country, right? When I say harmony, you can just picture what happened in Sabrimala. I am not an Ayyappa devotee, right? I have never been to Sabrimala, but I stood with my brothers and sisters who are devotees of Ayyappa, and we fought together, right? So even though I don't belong to that sampradaya, I watch out for their cause. I watch their back, in a sense, and make sure that their freedom is not attacked. So that is my idea of harmony, right? The other question is about converted Muslims, not accepting them back to the Hindu fold. So I see two reasons behind that, and I don't know why people get so agitated about this phenomenon and again attack caste blindly and like puppets. The first thing is, in the long history of Hindu-Muslim relationship in India, whenever such things have happened, Hindus have had to pay for their lives, for doing such things, right? If you marry, like the case with Ankit Saxena, for example, he was beheaded for having an affair with a Muslim girl. So this is not a one-off thing. This has been happening over and over again, and naturally, there is that fear. Secondly, and more importantly, Hindu marriage and Abrahamic marriage are two totally different things. A Hindu marriage traditionally is a union of families. That is why you also have some resistance, some natural resistance to intercaste marriage. I'm not making a moral objection to it. I'm just saying that there is a natural resistance to it because there is some degree of issue with families getting, compatibility between families. So
because the state is reminding them each and every day that you are from this caste. State incentivize करना छोड़ देंगे, कोई family में कोई कुछ नहीं बोलेगा.
Look at Hindu marriage that way, that it is actually a union of families and not just marriage in the modern sense. Then you get the answer of why there is so much resistance to getting a Muslim bride, because she will never assimilate, and the other part of the family, uska to koi question hi nahi hai. So I hope that answers.
It doesn't. Why
May I
are
pose a few questions? Is that okay? Okay, Harsh.
जैसे दीपक,
I'll just
such a clickbait. जैसे दीपक ने moderate करके छोड़ दिया पूरा debate.
Point in 30-40 seconds about this. I think it's very important not to conflate Hindu unity with homogeneity. I think that is something that is an Abrahamic worldview. I don't think that Hindu unity kind of presupposes.
ब्रह्मास्त्र निकाला है. Abrahamic बोल दो debate में सब everyone will now get let's say uncomfortable. Oh my god, am I Abrahamic, bro? किसी ना किसी दिन अभी टाइम आएगा कि हम लोगों को you are too colonialized, you are colonized, you are Abrahamic, ये सब भी हमको unapologetically ही बोलना पड़ेगा. मुझको तो ये अभी बोलना पड़ेगा ही because of so many attacks from some right wingers, but like Savarkar himself gets called European from many academics like Ashish Nandi, तो Pritish Nandi's brother. He says that what's this European stuff he's trying to impose on India. तो भाई अब बोलो हमको Abrahamic, हमसे उससे भी कुछ आता जाता नहीं है.
Homogeneity. For example, on Sabarimala, I also supported having the custom remain as it is, and obviously Sai worked on the case from a legal point of view. So my point is, it is important not to conflate at the same time, similarly, Sampradaya with Jati. Sampradaya, I think, is about my faith or my rituals or what I believe. Even if I've never been there, I can go and develop a lifelong respect and worship for a temple in Kerala, even though I don't live in that part of India. So it is not, in the same household, for example, I am Shiv Bhakt. I don't pray to Hanuman much. My mother prays to Hanuman. My father has a photo of Ram in his cell phone. I have never done that. For me, somehow Shivji is much more fascinating. So the idea that Hindu unity will force all of us to believe or act in a similar way, even within the same family, I think it needs to be discussed a bit more. And Sampradaya part should not be conflated with the Jati part. It is true that if in a Muslim or Christian context, unity will mean homogeneity, because otherwise you'll have schisms. And therefore, I don't think Ashish, with due respect, should, and I'm not saying he's deliberately doing it, should not be allowed to get away by saying unity is homogeneity. It is most certainly not.
Ashish, another point I would like to just add to what Harsh has said. Why this, if there is so much harmony, why it should lead to Hindu unity by itself, right? If I'm supporting Sabarimala devotees, then it's unity by itself.
No, exactly.
क्या बात है अरिहंत भाई, क्या बात है. What a fucking awesome point. And this is why Savarkar is forgotten and Savarkar was thrown under the bus. This is why Savarkar's expectations, dreams, plans were all a pipe dream. इसीलिए सरकार को कुछ करना चाहिए ही बोलते रहेंगे हम सब.
That is the thing. I mean,
let's wrap this segment up quickly, because then we won't leave anything for the last segment where we are going to have a free-flowing discussion.
Okay, no. So the question of Hindu unity again. I mean, and I speak this from experience because I've created enough content regarding the cases that we've fought through People for Dharma and Hindi Collective. And so, I mean, the kind of reactions that you get, for example, the recent case of Pashubali man, right? And the kind of reactions that we've got, that this is a primitive practice from Hindus, from Kattar political Hindus. So there is clear evidence that the political Hindu, by and large, does not anymore understand the idea of harmony between sampradayas and harmony between sects. And this is something that needs to be said again and again, that we need to bring back that harmony, which will, of course, lead to political unity.
I support Pashubali. As a political Hindu, I support Pashubali.
Can I just step into the picture now? I just have a couple of questions. Yeah, okay.
अचानक moderator आ गया.
So I asked, let's ask questions to each panelist.
Moderate
So the first is Arihant.
Actually, I will start with Raviji because there is a question that I think Raviji needs to answer, if it's okay. Yeah.
Are we going randomly then, or let them ask Raviji?
Yeah. So, Raviji, I think it's important to clarify this particular issue because you seem to make the point that there is some kind of an umbilical cord that connects Jati and Sampradaya. And you've said that if you effectively destroy the identity of Jati, then you translate to eradication or erosion of certain cultures or practices associated with it and ways of life associated with it. And this Harsh effectively refutes by saying that it's possible for him to be a part of the Hindu identity and move fluidly from one particular sampradaya to another without being excluded. Okay. Now, Harsh, here I have a point and I'll ask my question as well. So I don't want you to think I'm being sly about this. I'm being blunt about this. Okay. As someone who's argued the question of religious denomination before the Supreme Court and tried to introduce the issue of sampradaya, my understanding, which I'm opening it up for any kind of question, is that there are founders of a sampradaya who have a direct nexus to it as a consequence of the history that they have inherited or as a consequence of the lineage that they belong to. Okay. The difference is that these people ultimately become the torchbearers of that particular sampradaya and they keep that particular tradition alive. Whereas people like you and I who don't belong to that particular sampradaya have the freedom of stepping into that sampradaya for the purposes of visiting that particular institution and then getting out of it and then going back to whatever we fundamentally believe in. So for instance, I happen to be a Ram of Shaivite denomination, so to speak, but I'm entitled to go to Srirangam, and when I go there, I practice the rules of that particular temple and I get out of it. And when I get back, I go back into my home sampradaya. However, the ones who run that particular institution are the ones who have traditionally inherited that particular way of life and lineage. Okay. Now, if that be the case, don't you think that somewhere we are conflating our freedom to enter other sampradayas with the basic fact that sampradayas themselves represent certain lineages which have been passed on hereditarily, which is why every sampradayic institution has had the concept of a hereditary trustee, so that there are some people who continue to take on that particular lineage. And here I'll give you one simple example, and I will open it up for both responses and questions from Harsh as well as Ravi. Okay. In Tamil Nadu, the maximum number of idol thefts happen in those institutions where the trustees are not hereditary, because for them, the maintenance of that institution has become a transactional experience.
When it's public property, it's nobody's property.
Because if you happen to be a hereditary trustee, ये आपके family की विरासत बन जाती है और एक डर पैदा हो जाता है that you have a personal relationship with that particular deity, okay? And therefore, any kind of violation of the covenant with the deity will result in, let's say, visiting of the wrath of the deity is the fear, which is why idol thefts are typically less, statistically speaking, in those institutions. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I am saying it does happen, but by and large, it's an exception because there's a family connect and there's a traditional connect. Okay. Now, this takes us to Raviji has to factually answer this question. One, really, is there a connection, okay, between Jati and Sampradaya historically? Because you were the one to bring in history into this picture, and then Harsh has a point to make on this particular issue. Let him respond.
I would say Jati and Sampradaya have a very, very strong connection because see what Harsh talks about. They are the the superstructure, Hanuman or Ram or Shiva. These are superstructure deities, not specific to a particular community in India now, among the Hinduism. I will give other examples.
It used to be.
Let us take the case of the Arya Vaishyas of Andhra Pradesh. They have a specific Devi, Kula Devi called Vasavi Devi. Now, Vasavi Devi is worshipped only by the Arya Vaishyas. I have no idea. I don't even have any idea what the Purana of the deity is, how she came about, why she is worshipped, and what her rituals are, what are the special days, for her. Similarly, you have Padanatambadi Karupan in, Madurai, who is actually a Kshetrapalaka of Vishnu temple, but the deity literally belongs to the local color community. The deity might be a Kuladeva for other communities, but the colors have...
Where does the community fall in the four castes? Where do they come under? What do they come under?
Well, the Vaishyas, Arya Vaishyas are actually Vaishyas. The colors are a martial community. You can place them as Shudra or as Kshatriya based on whether they have or not.
वर्णा में घुसाने का, रेट्रोफिट करने का कोशिश मत कीजिए रवि जी, कभी नहीं हुआ है, कभी नहीं होगा. अब ये घुसाने का कोशिश कर रहे हैं, कहाँ कौन से वर्णा में घुसाए perfectly, नहीं होगा.
So, as I said, it's a fluid system. But the point is, each of these jatis have their specific deities, their specific rituals. And if you're going to destroy jati and say that there is no jati henceforth, the problem that arises is most of these people's faith and lives revolve around these jati deities.
Low IQ again. In what sense can we destroy jati or annihilate caste in any way that suddenly makes the guy stop worshipping whoever she wanted? Because that right is not going away, right? CPIM is not coming to power in the center. Even when they did come to power in West Bengal, they didn't do any such thing. तो कोई कभी भी किसी लॉ के बेसिस पे किसी को नहीं बोल रहा है कि आज से तुम तुम्हारे कुल देवता को पूजा करना बंद कर दो. Annihilation of caste agar in any way happens, who is stopping you legally from doing that? Which is why I'm saying the concern that Mr. Ravi here is pointing out might be on what's going to happen anyway if the state stops recognizing castes and reservations go away. You will end up forgetting your कुलदेवता. तो भाई अपने कुलदेवता को पूजा करने के लिए कि भी क्या सरकार को कुछ करना चाहिए वो बता रहे हो. Who is stopping you from worshipping your kuldevta? How is annihilation of caste related to this? Unless you mean annihilation of caste in the sense of Kushal Mehra, that you must consciously give up your identity. You must forget one fine morning that you are from this caste, like we urban kids from Bengal have done. So, but that's kind of predicated to intent that you must forget, you must basically become an atheist, you must not do any puja part. Okay, but Kushal doesn't even mean that. Kushal means do whoever's puja you want, but forget all your identity. That's a baseless claim anyway. I mean that might be a theoretically possible thing, but it's the people on this panel who are saying that they are connected. Jati identity bhul gaye to immediately I forget to worship also. If you are a person who believes in your kuldevta, how can you just forget it one fine morning? So it's so much ambiguity in this fucking debate from everyone. What does it mean to annihilate jati varna? From whose side? From state side और अपने अंतरात्मा से? किसी में कुछ clarity मुझे नहीं दिख रहा है.
When they have a problem, they immediately go to their Kuladeva. They don't go to some Vishwanatha and Kashi or Jagannatha and Jagannathpuri. Let us be blunt about it. You go to your local village deity, you go to your Kuladeva. Even in practice, when you go to some Jyotishi, the first question he will ask you is, have you done proper Shanti to your Kuladeva? With any problem you go. So you are trying to hit at the very root of the faith of these people. And if you don't have any kind of a system which can, replace it, and I'm sorry, you cannot replace it in a single stroke, unless you're going to convert them to some other form of religion.
Who is talking about converting them in a single stroke?
I'm telling you that is the kind of violence which Abrahamic faiths do, we should not be doing. So you can have intercaste marriage if you want. You can have, of course, we are having all these things. Of course, we don't follow jati-based occupation, but you cannot destroy jati as an institution. That's the first thing. And a follow-up thing to Harsh, just one moment. I actually wanted to speak on this. When you said that today the situation is far better than the past, I'll tell you this is not the first time all these liberal rights or women's rights have come up. It is a process. It is a wheel. It goes up and down. 4,000 years ago, all your liberal ideas, women's rights, everything was available in Babylon. 2,000 years ago, they were available in Rome. Once the empire of...
Yeah, AK Brahmo, we can have individual opinions on this, but it's not really our place to ask this or even say it's not important to someone who whom it is important, because at least not in this context, because here we are discussing whether people should have the right to have a Jyotish and Kuladevta in their lives or not, which I think they do. So here this is not a fruitful question to get into.
Rome came up and the emperors were trying to keep the place together. But, there is a very good book by J. Unwin. It's called Sex and Culture. You might like to, you might actually want to go through it. The idea is that this is a pattern.
I have no fucking idea what the fuck destruction of jati means. Unless someone specifies destruction of the jati from whom, from which side, the state side or organic, this question can never be answered. Even if you say no, not from state side, from the individual. So that's so dependent on market realities that this question is, I mean, insanely boring and pointless to me. Whether you will follow your kul and jati duties or not in the traditional sense, whether you will worship or believe your kul devta devi in that specific temple or not, absolutely depends on the market. And if you work somewhere else and never return to your village community, you maybe have that murti in your home in some urban place. So सब हो गया, it's a win-win situation. पैसा भी हुआ, urbanization भी हुआ, और तुम्हारा कुल देवता को तुमने पूजा भी किया. एम्बिग्विटी का पूरा मतलब पीक पे चला गया है डिस्कशन.
There is a pattern. There is a pattern on all these things. It is the change happens according to the requirement of time. Something comes up, then it vanishes. Something comes up again. So don't think that it is, something is better than the other. It is actually a result of the historical requirement.
ओह अच्छा, इंटरकास्ट मैरिज. तो इंटरकास्ट मैरिज होना चाहिए. That is a very weird statement to make, because marriages will always happen between similar status groups and exclusive consumption patterns. Should happen बोलने वाले कोई भी नहीं है. कोई भी कौन है बोलने वाला? How can someone be in a position to say intercaste marriages should happen? See, unless you use the status lens on caste, it's always going to be an absolute waste of time discussing caste. You see, everywhere, every thread we are pulling at and trying to elaborate it further than these people have gone into, we are hitting an absolute wall, because they are not acknowledging the aspect of status, and we are. तो इंटरकास्ट मैरिजेस में भी क्या है, तुम अगर फैंसी ड्रेस कंपटीशन कॉस्प्लेइंग के तौर पे तुम्हारा पास्ट कास्ट फॉलो करते हो, तो वो मैरिज वैसे भी प्रॉब्लमेटिक है. अगर तुम अपने स्टेटस में किसी और कास्ट में मैरिज करते हो, वो तो इंटरकास्ट मैरिज हुआ भी नहीं वैसे. और अगर तुम ये बोल रहे हो कि नहीं, अभी आज के दिन में स्टेटस जो भी हो, तुमको कोई अलग कास्ट में ही मैरी करना है, ये भी कैसे हो गया? तो तुम बोल रहे हो कि सौरव गांगुली कांट मैरी डोना बैनर्जी और गांगुली व्हाटएवर शी वाज अ ब्राह्मण, और टुडे सौरव गांगुली's daughter has to marry a Shaha. How can that work? Based on her circle, most of her friends will be Brahmin, Vaidya or Caste. How is this going to work? God damn it. So without status, we can't get anywhere.
Requirements. That's it.
Harsh, over to you. It's up.
Yes, okay. I think. Thank you, Raviji, and thank you.
Oh, Donna is Caste. So see.
To Sai for a very nuanced question and kind of playing the devil's advocate to both Raviji and me. So I'll answer the question. I think we need to, again, so there were two conflations, right? One conflation was between Sampradaya and Jati. The other conflation was between unity and...
Oh, and the biggest problem with saying that intercaste marriages must happen is what Harsh has already faced. He gets accusations from that Anuradha Tiwari girl and Nupur Sharma, which is an insane thing to say to Harsh, but you open yourself up to those kinds of insane attacks as well, that hands off our Brahmin daughters. It's as if people are after specifically Brahmin women or upper caste women.
Homogeneity. Now, even within Sampradaya and Jati, there's another conflation that we are doing wrongly. What we are doing wrongly is we are conflating the management of the temple, the owners who are running, as you said, the family which is running the murti, the temple, the full devta, with the broader community that may or may not expand beyond birth-based lineage, which wants to follow that. So you are absolutely right, and which actually goes to how we need to reform the temple-based system on which you and I had a heated discussion today. So and which I mentioned that Rangesh's piece along with Amar's piece, and I actually mentioned that along with the piece of local voting for Hindus, I actually support super delegates, even if it is caste-based, based on the historical rights and customs of those who used to take care of that mandir. Super delegates, for those who do not understand, is a term people who get slightly more votes per person. Generally there's one vote, one person. I'm saying super delegates, for example, they happen in the US Democratic primaries. There are some people, some eminences who get more votes. So therefore, I agree with Raviji. Don't change it in one system. There is too much violence in Abrahamic system. I'm happy to do radical goals in conservative measures, small r, small c, no worries. Now, therefore, it's important to understand, before I come to the gender and sex point you mentioned in the second half, Raviji, it is important to mention that even if I go, for example, if I'm visiting all the Shiv mandirs in the country, and who have different histories and different kind of mappings to the local gods, this is in Greco-Roman philosophy, it's called henotheism. Henotheism is basically mapping one particular kind of god to a local god, which is basically exactly what we do, and which is why our system is so beautiful, harmonious. But if I want to go through all that and I want to pay my respects, luckily the beauty of Hinduism is nobody's going to stop me. Nobody's going to say,
कभी stop भी करते होंगे. But you see, I am at least not feeling a complete wholesale disrespect for Harsh Madhusudan here, because on everything else he's awesome, on free markets and stuff. And especially he's one of the two people in the history of this country who has defeated, one of the three people might be, defeated Shashi Tharoor completely in a debate. So it's only on caste where everyone loses some IQ.
Is this your Kul Devta or not? Otherwise, you can't enter the mandir. So I believe that I can be part of that sampradaya, even if with not as much intensity as people of the jati, especially within the jati, those who are the management of the temple. And even if we then denationalize the temple, we can give them something more than equal importance. And that can be a conservative process, which over time can become more and more democratic. So I don't think there is an intrinsic conflict between jati and sampradaya. Why? With due respect, the way perhaps you have shown, Ravijina, quickly on the point of women and right, I agree with you. Nothing is linear. Nothing is teleological. Many things are up and down. Nonetheless, as of at this point, so I'm not predicting the future. I'm not being teleological here. I'm not being historicist here. I'm saying as of now, I think it is objectively better, both in terms of people from so-called lower castes, as well as people from the female sex or gender, even between sex and gender. There is a lot of political discussion if you go by the T of LGBT these days. I think in both the concepts, there is a remarkable improvement, in my view, objective improvement compared to what was there in the past.
Who the fuck disagrees with this? Does anyone actually in the panel disagree with this? Why are we bringing this point up repeatedly?
It may fall again in the future. In the past, we may still have been better than Europe or China. That's fine. But within India, we are better off compared to what we were in the past, no matter what the future is.
What?
Can I make
What Ravi is saying? People had a better life back then.
10 seconds. No, but
Yeah,
you haven't
Ideanism,
addressed the issue of the situation of the Shudra.
Bro, I'm right now more comfortable than Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj or Chandragupta Maurya ever was in their entire fucking life. What is Ravi saying here?
Women, when you compare it to pre-colonial India, right? They were objectively better.
Here, in fact, I have a
than they
common
are
question
today.
to all of you, and this is built on what
How do
Ashish
you-
is saying. I think it's important to make this very, very clear. Now, I am assuming for a moment that perhaps all of us are on the same page, that there has been some influence of cultural Marxism in the distortion of Indian history. Okay, if that is something that we admit to some extent, and I'm not going to use that to airbrush everything that was wrong with us, because one, I don't know how much of it was wrong, and I'll be in a position to say.
अरे भाई मार्क्स के अलावा मार्क्सिस्ट के अलावा कोई और यूरोपियन स्कॉलर को या फिर कोई मतलब लिबरल आर्ट्स कोई जायंट स्कॉलर को नहीं पढ़ेंगे तो ऐसा ही होगा. सिर्फ मार्क्सिस्ट को ही पढ़ा है आप लोगों ने. मैक्स वेबर क्या मार्क्सिस्ट था क्या?
I'm not getting into that. I'm simply saying you can't pixelate everything using cultural Marxism. But if that's the case, is there any particular reason for us to negate the influence of cultural Marxism on caste discourse in India? Because if we say that cultural Marxism has had an impact on all significant areas of Indian life, especially with respect to Hindu life, is there any reason to believe that cultural Marxism has not distorted even caste-related history to the extent of and with the intent of creating a class war and a system of oppression and structural privilege?
But it's also economic Marxists who have completely debunked all modern-day mainstream caste-based myths and propagandas.
Is the standard phrase? Okay, Harsh, please start with that, and then we'll have response.
Rahil, can I just put in one more question in there so Harsh can maybe deal with both questions at the same time before we move on? So Harsh, in your initial argument, because when I was reading, see, I'm not somebody who is very scripturally aware of what our position was with respect to caste or not. And I would like to, sort of admit that upfront. But initially, your premise was, not in this debate, but before that the Hindu community should do away with caste altogether. Okay? But here you seem to be saying that caste is in terms acceptable when you talk about certain organizations within the Hindu society. However, you stand opposed to caste discrimination. So are you now making a distinction between jati and jativad? Because earlier you gave us a slightly different impression as if you would want to do away with caste altogether.
I think
Gravity, good question here. But you see, today this debate is not happening anymore between these people, at least for that very specific reason that we just ended up pinpointing a few minutes back, that they have hit a fucking wall. Unless you look into status, unless you look at caste from the lens of status, you won't get anywhere. You won't have any answers. You'll only have shouting matches. In their minds also, they are having shouting matches. Every one of them thinks today that they are right about what they think about caste. And if they were so right, they would go on debating about it and would have no problem debating. But they have hit a wall and therefore can't debate further. I also think I'm right, but I can debate all day long. All these six people.
I think it's an excellent question. I'll first answer Nupur's question, and then I'll answer Sai's question on cultural Marxism and its impact on historiography of caste. So on Nupur's question first, let me be very clear. I'm not just anti-casteism. I'm anti-caste. I want to see the end of caste. But I'm, despite a lot of anonymous handles thinking otherwise.
Birth-based caste. I'm just trying to understand.
Birth-based. When I say, sorry. So Arihan's point is well taken. The Portuguese word. Whenever I say caste right now, I mean birth-based. Okay, I'm birth-based only. I want to see the end of birth-based caste, not just casteism or casteist discrimination.
Why is Ravi laughing?
I want to see the end of it. Having said that, I'm not sure how much state power I want to use in favor of that. That's a separate question.
Great.
For example, the Indian government actually does give money to intercaste couples where one of the member of the couple, one of the two people are from the SC community. So by the way, the government is already doing that. So I'm not even going as far as to say that we should necessarily do that. I'm saying I want to see the end of it. But despite some rumors in the traditionalist or what shorthand is called trad internet, I'm not that dumb. I don't want to do it tomorrow. As Raviji rightly mentioned, this cannot be done overnight. That will certainly have a kind of certain kind of almost metaphorical violence to it. But my end goal is clear, which that normative end goal may or may not be shared by Raviji or Ashish, and Arihant, I'm not so sure. Arihant can answer that separately. So I think that answers the question.
Nupur, can you switch off your mic, please?
Yeah.
Harsh, 1 minute.
Harsh, here I think it's important
VXT is looking for some easy money here. Someone explained to him what the scheme is. Even I hadn't heard of it.
for you to go further, because I think unwittingly perhaps you're setting up yourself for a problem here. Okay. Now, assume for a moment that you have explained, and I think your position to the extent that I've understood is clear, that you do want to do away with the concept of birth-based caste. I'm clear about that. I understand that. Okay. Now, assume for a moment that the castes in themselves, or the members of those jatis in themselves, are comfortable with it in the interest of preserving their heritage and in the interest of preserving their way of life. As an outsider to all the jatis that you are not a part of, okay, one thing that they would want to know is, what is your right to expect that or to push towards that? And two, what is the end goal? What is the objective here? Is it Marxist egalitarianism, or what is the end goal here?
I'll mention that very quickly. First of all.
Wait, Gravity has asked a good question here. I don't really have the answer to it. I just have a hunch. He's asking, isn't this a very obvious thing to look at, which is the obvious thing being to look at caste through the lens of status groups? Or is it easier for us Bengalis because it's pretty obvious when we look around us in Kolkata? No, to be fair, even I did not think of looking at caste as status groups before I knew of mysterious sociologist, right? He was the one who pointed this out to me. And that then I learned that so many people have worked on this. And if you tie all of them together, basing first and foremost from Max Weber, who first stumbled upon it, that these are just status groups. After that, you can tie together many people's research and claim what we are claiming here, based on all these legit scholars' research. But do I have an advantage as a Bengali in understanding this? Perhaps because we don't have the casteism in the traditional sense, whereas we have casteism in the Max Weberian sense, the inevitable sense. Maybe it was easier for me to grasp for that reason. But even then, many Bengalis in our comment section still don't get it. They keep commenting absolute weird stuff. Caste is class. They are not. They keep saying no. Even a Shudra guy can be high status. तो भाई वही तो हम बोल रहे हैं. तो आज के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में क्या है और पास्ट कॉन्टेक्स्ट में क्या था? पास्ट का कॉन्टेक्स्ट में जो कास्ट में था वो आज के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में सेम हायरार्की के पोजीशन में नहीं है. दैट इज द पॉइंट. बट पीपल आर नॉट रियली अंडरस्टैंडिंग इट, इवन दो सम ऑफ देम आर Bengalis.
Well, my pushing is only verbal. My pushing is only activist based. My pushing is only trying to convince people. As I mentioned right now, the government of India actually gives 50,000 rupees to a couple which gets married, one of whom is an SC. And one of them is not an SC within the Hindu community across various states. And in fact, I think the amount has been increased of late in some states. Wow. I am not even going to the extent of supporting that. So it should be very clear that my end goal is to be achieved by persuasion. So I'm not at all saying that this should happen because of some statist social engineering. I think that's very
fair enough. It's just Madhusudan's opinion that this should happen. I believe even that opinion itself is weird, but it's just an opinion.
Yeah. So I think what I think with modern urbanization and capitalism, this is inevitable. I think it is inevitable within 2 generations.
तो भाई,
I am just trying to
तो भाई 1 घंटा 21 मिनट तक क्या कर रहे थे हम? तो हर दिन ट्विटर पे क्या डिबेट हो रहा है? ये लाइन बोल के खत्म नहीं कर सकते थे? What the fuck?
Provide some kind of moral and normative cover in however insignificant a way as one individual is insignificant. So it should be very clear. I'm not even arguing for statist support to it, even though that already exists. And I am saying normatively, I want to see the end of it. I will only talk about it. And as a separate analyst, not as an advocate's hat, but as an analyst's hat, I think it's likely to happen the way, if I see the way economic growth is going to happen, the way women are going to be financially independent, I think it's likely to happen in 2 generations. Before I come, Ashish, once again, I just quickly want to answer Sai's last question, because I think it is an important question. He asked that we all agree to varying extents that cultural Marxism has exacerbated dharmic or...
I'm so sorry. Aapne inevitability ki baat ki based on capitalism, which I understand. And
my understanding.
Yeah, of course. On the basis of, see, one, regardless of who respects my skill set as a lawyer or not, I respect your skill set as an economist. Okay, so I'm not going to question that. Okay, because I believe that respect of reciprocity is very, very important. Now, the question I'm asking you is very simple. Let's assume that I take for granted that it is inevitable. Okay, and you are opposed to state intervention, and you're looking at persuasion, and you're only expanding the conversation. I understand that. Okay, my question to you was,
if it's inevitable, why do we need to pursue or persuade? On this, I think even Savarkar had a clear goal. It was, what Harsh is saying, that's basically the Savarkarite position. But you see, back in Savarkar's time, status groups did map onto the Jati names. Today it doesn't. So we can't fault Savarkar for saying that back in those days. And women had less say in marriages and stuff. So it would make sense to say it in that era.
Is that inevitable desirable? Do you believe in it? If yes, why?
Yes, I think it is desirable. I think it is perfectly fine. For example, large parts of, not all parts, but large parts of urban India are already living like that, especially in the younger generation. I don't think they're anyway less Hindu, despite the stereotypes of South Bombay or South Delhi being woke and more concerned about the Second Amendment of the US Constitution than the Second Amendment of the Indian Constitution and all that. We can all laugh about those jokes. But I'm perfectly fine. For example, the question can be, I'm not saying you want to personalize it, but I can perhaps personalize it and say the question is my lived experience necessarily undesirable in a quote-unquote Hindu and Dharmic bracket or parenthesis? And I don't think it is. I think it's perfectly fine. People can therefore go to various mandirs. Those various mandirs, as I said, can continue to have a certain special right for certain families and lineages, which may be caste-based, but within my philosophical framework, I can see it as a property right. I don't have to necessarily, you will always be a father's son by definition. So I don't have to see that because it is going through a caste. I can see they have some super delegates or some extra voting as a historical acknowledgement of their feudatory rights. Can go through what is effectively caste in some cases, but is effectively a property right in my worldview. So I think it is perfectly desirable. I want to see it. I think that will lead to an explosion of sampradayas. I think it will lead to many different kind of modern day gurus who perhaps more orthodox people would reject. For example, the Shankaracharya of Dwarka said Sai Baba is not a Hindu. Said worshipping Sai Baba is not a Hindu. But I know many Hindus who go and worship Sai Baba. They don't feel un-Hindu. So now, what is Sai Baba's caste? I don't know. So my answer is yes, it is desirable. I think it is inevitable. I'm not even advocating for state support. I'm advocating just based on my persuasive powers, however big or strong that might be. Before coming to Ashish, I'll just answer your earlier question about cultural Marxism and how that applies to historiography of caste. As we all nodded our heads that yes, to some extent, cultural Marxism is there in Indian discourse. It has infiltrated Indian discourse, and it will try to deliberately or sometimes less consciously pick and choose on Indic and Dharmic fault lines to exacerbate that, to divide that. Let's be very honest that what has happened in 2014 and 2019, by the way, it is an interesting thing for a political analyst to do that. I think it's the first time in 2019 where the majority of Hindus who voted, that guy became the prime minister. Because you see, Jawaharlal Nehru and Indira Gandhi never got 50% of the votes. And it's fair to assume a large part of the support came from the minorities. It is probably in 2019, for the first time, the guy who got the majority of Hindu votes became the prime minister. And I don't think it's a coincidence that has happened as caste is weakening. That despite all kinds of economic problems, the Hindutva flag continues to politically rise. I don't think it's a coincidence that it's happening while caste is gradually weakening. So while I admit that certain atrocity literature might be created and in fact is being created, some Dalit Lives Matter are deliberately linking themselves to Black Lives Matter in the US, and they're kind of fancying themselves as a MLK Junior. And that kind of context does not apply to India at all. So, however, because certain people have exaggerated a reality, that does not mean that a smaller version, but nonetheless very brutal reality still existed. So I think we all have enough nuance to acknowledge that while some people...
यही है problem ये debate का. They are going to go on forever, circle back to debating the degree of casteism, degree of atrocities. That is not the debate to have. And some people say there was no atrocities. That only a negligible minority of a population says that. That's not an important thing to acknowledge anyway. But you have to acknowledge that no matter what the fuck the degree, is it distinctly Hindu or not? And did it happen only in India or not? That is the only fucking important question regarding caste, not the degree. डिग्री कहाँ पे तुम क्या क्या एग्जांपल निकालोगे? हर कोई हर जगह से डिग्री, डिफरेंट डिग्रीज ऑफ कास्टिज्म निकालेगा, स्मॉल डिग्रीज एंड देन हाई डिग्रीज और एंटी कास्ट मूवमेंट्स, सब कुछ निकाल आएगा. तो हम डिग्री डिबेट नहीं कर सकते, करना चाहिए ही नहीं. इट्स अ वेस्ट ऑफ टाइम.
People who are not our well-wishers are exaggerating certain things. Some version or a reduced version, but still very brutal, of that thing still existed. So my point of view on that is very clear.
Harsh, sorry, Ashish, can I just ask a couple of follow-up questions before we go ahead?
Sure.
Otherwise, I'm sure I'll forget. So, Harsh, a couple of questions from whatever has.
Very important question, AK Bromo. A lot of people wonder this. Do you think Dalits of today will become upper caste of tomorrow and the Bhadraloks will become Dalits tomorrow? In some sense, it has already happened. Bhadraloks are treated as menial IT coolies everywhere else. They are no longer looked at as the guy guy we must respect, right? Bengalis are treated as basically better Biharis in the entire country. So Bhadralokism तो वैसे भी गड्ढे में गया है और they are about to become Dalits completely. And will Dalits become upper caste? It will take at least 2 generations. They will need lots of money, which can't happen with reservation, which will happen either because of free markets or random wealth distribution. अच्छा आप लोअर कास्ट है, ये तो लीजिए थोड़ा पैसा लेंगे, अगले जनरेशन में कल्चरल कैपिटल एक्यूमुलेट करेंगे, उसके बाद दिमाग में आया अच्छा स्टेटस ऑनर हमारा इतना ज्ञान है, उसके बाद वो भद्रलोक बन पाएंगे.
Has been discussed between you and Sai, and please consider me a layman, okay? So I might just make mistakes in interpretation.
Please be a
I will never consider you a layman.
You're a layperson, you're not a layman.
Laywoman, anyway. So I asked her.
She/her.
Okay, you're not allowed to pull my leg on my channel. Stop it. Reserve it for later. So Harsh, you said that you're okay as far as temple property is concerned, going to certain caste-based families because that's what the traditional property right is, right? No.
I did not say that. I said that local Hindus, I was referring to the Swarajya article by Rangesh and Amar, who wrote that basically local Hindus, if a temple is being denationalized, local Hindus should get a vote in that. So that is my starting premise. I agree with that, which was never existing earlier. I am saying to make it the transition slightly more acceptable, to get this radical.
This is an interesting thing to consider. I never considered this. I never thought of this side of the argument. They don't bring this up anymore in this debate, that if temple freedom is granted, should the locals who run the temple and want maybe sarkar ko kuch karna chahiye, should they have a say? And what if they are dumb fucks and they on the day of the voting they think nahi sarkar ko hi karna chahiye? Tab chalo theek hi hai. After all, we can't force libertarianism down the throats of everyone. तो कुछ लोग सरकार को दे के रखेंगे, अपना दान का पैसा से रास्ता वास्ता बना लेंगे, और कुछ लोगों के दिमाग में होगा कि नहीं भाई हमको तो खुद से ही चलाना है. That's nice.
Aim in a slightly more conservative way, you add super delegates to the family that used to be the fiduciary trustees of that particular temple before they were nationalized de jure or de facto, for example under HRC in Tamil Nadu and so on.
Shikhar, he's asking, didn't the Bengali upper caste destroy Assam under the British? In what sense? Do you mean accumulation of resources or pushing for policies with the British that screwed with Assam? And in what ways did it screw with Assam? I do not know of this.
And so forth. So I'm saying, but that does not mean that larger Hindu community will not vote on the management of that particular temple.
No, 1 second. But you're saying you're okay with the super delegate being caste-based, correct?
Yes, because in my worldview, for some continuity, what you can say, I'm not seeing that as a caste-based. I'm seeing it as a property right. Because when a certain Purohit in the 1800 to 1700 was given an expectation that if you just work at this, your children will be able to make a living, and they have a certain love to the deity, which I fully agree with Sai or at least Ravi ji.
Bhai, if Harsh Madhusudan agrees to even this, that there is some aspect of birth-based things in a sampradaya which is acceptable to him even, then why are even trads pissed off with Harsh Madhusudan? So you see, both sides are pissed off with people on both sides of this panel just for vibes. Not really hard policy, and no one's even discussing policy all that much. What an ambiguous debate.
That there is a certain, I think Sai also mentioned it, because of that certain love, the statistical chance of that murti being stolen is lower. So
yes,
acknowledging that, but I want the percentage of delegates to decrease, but over time.
No, that's right. What I'm trying to understand is if the person can be based on caste, for example, that's what you're saying, for the transition to be easier, the community that is voting on who should take care of the temple and what traditions of the temple should carry on are essentially the devotees of that temple, correct? are the ones who are going
actually the proposal says all Hindus in that geographical area actually. So proposal actually does not say devotees, it is implied, it is assumed so.
It is assumed that all the people who are voting are going to be devotees and followers of the tradition of that temple.
Yes, exactly, VST. I have been bringing this up in the last few live streams. That happens in Bengal even today. Like society के complex का main lift तो कोई labor वाला या दूध वाले को भी use करने का permission नहीं है. That is casteism. That it might even have hygiene based reasons, जो कि पिछले जमाने में hygiene से घूम के status होके ritual pollution और ritual honor के जगह honor का जगह ले लेता था. Okay, which is why casteism is inevitable. A.K. Brahmo is saying devil's argument, temple becomes free. What if the temple becomes free? Locals or trusts who come to influence the temple decide that in order to increase revenue, they need to get more people in. So they advocate sacred prostitution. See, prostitution is illegal anyway in the country. So what is going to be looked at from the state's side, as a matter of law, is that it was a honey trap situation going on in the temple. Now, anywhere, anyone can set up a prostitution ring to attract people. Does it mean it has to be nationalized? Today, I can have 50 prostitutes hang out in my home studio, just because maybe I'll say that, okay, every time you make a song with me, you get to fuck a girl for one afternoon. तो अब मुझे जेल में डालो prostitution के लिए, पूरा का पूरा स्टूडियो नेशनलाइज कर दोगे क्या? और कोई और आके मेरा घर में बैठ के मेरा स्टूडियो चलाएगा?
Now, I'm putting forward a hypothetical.
I'm not sure that they will be followers of that tradition. Actually, I'm not. That is an assumption which we cannot make.
Okay, so then are we saying that the Hindus who are not followers or believers of a specific temple tradition get to vote? For example, if
Yes.
I don't have faith in Sabarimala tradition, I don't have faith in Lord Ayyappa, even as a Hindu, should I get a say on what should be or should not be followed by the devotees of Lord Ayyappa? See, we're talking about a very diverse religion like Hinduism. This we have to keep in mind. We are not Abrahamics, right? So A, should I get a say in what the devotees of Lord Ayyappa can or cannot follow as a Hindu, but as somebody who has no faith in the traditional, in the traditions of Lord Ayyappa, in the traditions of
My simple answer to that. Okay.
That's one. Two, if we have Hindus voting as to who should be the caretaker of a specific temple, you are saying you view it as a property matter. I agree. However, if that person is being elected on the basis of caste, and hypothetically, if the traditions of that temple says that that temple will allow or disallow people of a specific community, negative and positive, where do you know where that caste, caste consideration begins and where it ends? Which is why I asked you, are we making a distinction between jati and jati-vad? Okay, because if jati, please continue.
Yeah, I understand both the points. I'll say the first point. First point is very simple to answer. The point is we don't know what happens in the hearts of men and women. So if you're going to have a governance system which gives right to all the local Hindus, you can theoretically say only those devotees of temple X sign up. I think that's fine as a first filter, but there is no way to know what is happening in Nupur's heart, whether she's actually a follower. Maybe she's a rebel at heart with respect to that temple's traditions. Nonetheless, she's a locally located Hindu. If she signs yes, and then she gets to vote. So I think that's a very practical point. On the second point, I think it's again very simple. Indian jurisprudence, because of its essential religious practice and all that, is a big mess right now in the sense that what I think is what will be applied to a secular place. For example, if you do not allow a person of a certain caste to enter a certain restaurant, I'm not talking about the sanctum sanctorum, I'm talking about the temple, the entire temple structure as an analogy to say a restaurant. If Indian laws do not allow a person of a certain caste to enter a civil or secular establishment, I think in my understanding of any good jurisprudence, that should apply irrespective to even religious establishments, not just Hindu, but also Muslim, Christian, etc.
By the way, even in restaurants, in the cooking area, not everyone's allowed to enter. They're not prevented from entering that place because of their caste, but for some reason or the other, which could have ended up being caste-like or ritual pollution and purity in the yesteryears. Customer थोड़ी जाने का permission है kitchen में, कोई भी random restaurant में.
And so on and so forth. So my answer to your question about if there's a possible chance.
Temple is not a secular institution.
No, I'm not saying it's secular. I'm saying the rules that
secular institution should apply equally or even more to a religious institution. That is his
yes,
argument.
exactly. Yeah, my point is it should apply to all institutions, period. And therefore, that will take care of the extreme step of saying no to any particular caste entry because a certain backdoor entry has been given through super delegates. So I think my point on this is how do you design a new governance structure? My broader point in this is we all have to be flexible and we have to work out a system which while radical remains some sense of continuity. So I mentioned that in response to Raviji that I don't want to stand up and burn all things just because we are so my point is I'm ready to compromise on that. My normative North Star remains that there is no caste in terms of entry, exit, or
about this, we'll go on arguing, so I'm going to let go of this point. And I'm just going to say that I do not agree with the application of secular rules to religious places, not just Hinduism, whether it's Islamic, whether it's
even Harsh Madhusudan is saying that. Where's the disagreement?
Islamic institution or a Christian institution. What you said, that the secular rule should apply to religious places, I just don't agree with that.
Equal. May I just make these 3 points? I think this is open for everyone. And Harsh, wherever you think that more questions are being directed at you, please stop at it. The basic point is this. Harsh's point about hereditary property rights, especially caste as a hereditary property right, is precisely the manner in which it has been implemented, and that's precisely why the hereditary role is seen as a heritable, successionable right. Okay, so for all practical purposes, caste, at least as viewed by Indian jurisprudence with respect to temple institutions, has been in the context of a heritable right. Okay, so the moment you assume that this is a heritable right and it becomes a property right, the question with respect to interference with the property right in the name of anything else becomes a higher standard for the other person to establish. Because if it's a property right, you need to have specific and very good reasons to interfere with that particular property right. Okay. Now, I'm not going to apply this concept of a property right in spaces outside the temple, because that is where caste has a very different societal role altogether. But with respect to religious establishments, it translates to a very specific heritable right, and that's exactly how. So if you look at all these denominational rights, how they operate, whether it's a Brahminical denomination or a non-Brahminical denomination, they typically have a scripture where the deity of that particular temple is seen as having given them a promise that you shall henceforth control this particular institution. Okay, and that is precisely what gives rise to the concept of a denomination in the Abrahamic sense and as a sampradaya in the Indic sense. Okay, that's point number 1. Point number 2, Harsh, perhaps you may want to consider that even the position of a super delegate in the structure that you propose is still recognizing the superiority of one particular identity over others with respect to that particular institution, because they have a relationship with that particular institution, right? So we still approve of, or at least end up institutionalizing some form of caste structure or a class structure, even in the structure that you propose, right?
Yeah, at a lower level, but that's how you transition. That's how I'm proposing as a transition.
In the proposal,
my normative end goal is actually to be in a situation where, for example, all the local Hindus vote and they say, oh, by the way, this family was supporting it, but there is this one very bright young scholar who we think will be able to take care of this murti going forward better. And there should be a situation whereby the large number, if there is a very large majority in the normal adult franchise voting in the local area, the super delegates will be able to be overcome so long as there is a very strong majority in the one-to-one vote structure. So there's no point getting too technical, because I think it's difficult to explain in a podcast sense what I have in mind.
Frankly speaking, I think an economist's position on the temple ecosystem is very, very welcome, and I think it's very, very important. I just wanted you to consider this for your own consumption when you go back and work on this proposal. Okay. 1, the concept of a private temple and the concept of a public temple is recognized by law. So therefore, the administrative structures are different there. Okay. Second, the concept of a denominational temple and the concept of a non-denominational temple is also recognized. Now there is a cross-pollination between each of these 4 categories, and it gives rise to multiple categories. Okay. So the law as well as the administrative structure cannot be identical with respect to each of these categories of religious institutions. And because then unequals will be treated as equals, which again would be a problematic issue, both from an economic standpoint, from a right standpoint, as well as a relationship standpoint. This is something that you may want to consider. Yes.
I'll just quickly say something, and Arihant wants to go.
In this very context, we'll have to discuss Vext's comment here. He's saying he just assumed the temple, excluding the sanctum sanctorum, is a secular place comparable to a restaurant. Vext, you see, if it's since there is no temple freedom, since it's ultimately kind of the property of the government, right, or it's being run by the government, therefore for the sanctum sanctorum, it's just a negotiation that okay, at least here we are allowing you to allow or disallow people based on their caste, but the rest of the temple, which is not sanctum sanctorum, and it means something to not be the sanctum sanctorum, नहीं तो क्या कोई अंतर ही तो नहीं रहता sanctum sanctorum और rest of the temple में, तो बाकी का जगह is actually like a restaurant only, because it's government run and it's not the sanctum sanctorum.
I'll give a very quick analogy to what I have in mind. For example, last year, Narendra Modi's government brought in EWS quota. Right? He brought the EWS quota, economically weaker section quota. So while it was on top of an existing caste-based affirmative action system. So you got, and if you notice, the only people who voted against that were people from Muslim parties in India. I think that's very telling in India, why they saw the danger in that thing normatively being approved, that if this is the foot in the door for at some stage affirmative action, not today, not tomorrow, but a transition, some kind of sunset clause, at some stage, finally Modi's government has been able to get a foot in the door for something which is non-caste based, even though technically OBC is already community, it's not, or class, it's technically not caste there also, but let us take the de facto understanding of that instead of a de jure understanding. So basically, now my thinking on the temple point is, instead of having such a radical proposal, the way, for example, Rangesh and Amar said, which might not see reality, I am more interested in that proposal seeing reality if by conceding the historical right, while this temple is denationalized, of the family that used to take care of. So for me, the principle of super delegates is just historical continuity. But the non-family local Hindus all getting a vote is a new element inside. That is the foot in the door for something that can be tweaked in the future. So I see that as an analogy of EWS quota, of getting that normative principle approved, because then you can continue to change the ratio of how you want to go more towards caste or less towards caste.
Fair enough. I get your point.
Okay.
Arihan,
So I
Ashish,
just want to make one point. Harsh, the proposal of giving votes to everyone, every Hindu in that one area where the temple is located, I think that will translate into castes, particular castes, which are in majority in that area, hijacking their management of the temple. So what you are going to replace is a family hereditary system, which is, okay, you can say it is caste-based, with a system which is inherently casteist in nature itself. So isn't it a contradiction for people who are opposing the caste? Yeah.
I'll answer that. I think again, one of the reasons.
I have a related question.
Raviji, go ahead, Raviji.
See, the first thing is, even today in politics, caste does exist. And whatever people say, the fact is that even in 2019 elections, caste has played a very important role in most of the constituencies. Arihant may also agree with me, I believe. I mean, those who have been following politics very closely, they cannot deny it.
Arihant has very strong views about that for Haryana, but that's later.
Yeah. No,
Anyway,
I mean, you cannot.
so,
You cannot
anyway, coming to
ignore
the
fact that how much the caste. Everybody is crediting BJP for such a brilliant caste, giving tickets to people of every caste, giving representation to so many castes and everything. So how can we say that that was not a factor? We can say that Hindu identity or the nationalism.
No, I did not say it's not a factor.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying that.
Anyway,
Role of caste. Okay.
Can the panelists who want
The point is,
to get into it?
you made a thing.
I think we're slightly diverging. So let's just wrap.
I'll come to the question. It's about a statement made by Harji in the past, about temple administration in the past, rather, that there was no question of the general.
Yeah, gravity. We do. They are blind people trying to touch each other in a dark room.
Being involved in temple administration in the past, that is being brought up now. It is absolutely wrong, because one, in most of the major temples across India, the denomination always had a say. Let me be very blunt. It cannot be the normal Hindus of the location, but Hindus of that particular denomination. I will give you the best possible example here, which is very close to my place, Triplicane Parthasarathi temple in Chennai, about 1,400 years old at the very least. Now, this temple belongs to a particular subsect of the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya called the Tenkali subsect. Before the government took over the temple, the practice was that there will be 3 trustees. One will be a Telugu guy, because there were a good number of Telugus there. The other will represent, one trustee to represent the priest of the temple. And the third one was required to be a Shudra of that locality. Okay. All these 3 people were elected by the Panchayat of that place. But there was a very clear rule that all these 3 people have to belong to the Tenkalai subsect of the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. The reason being that it has its own practices, its own rituals, its own restrictions, its own liturgy even. And others cannot even understand where to start and where to end. So the point being that these people will be answerable to the community, but at the end of the day, the administration rested in a denomination made up of people from various castes. So the claim that it was always only with the hereditary trustee, with others not having a say in it, never so. Even in the case of a temple like Padmanabha Swami temple, where people might talk about the trustee being the sole authority, the system has an internal checks and balances. There is an Nektara Yogam, there is a Tantri, and there were always a community of the employees who had a say in the temple matters as well. So never please make a statement that it was all in the hands of a single person or single community.
This is for Harsh. I'm just merely translating one thing for you to consider, and you respond to that. Okay, please respond to that, and I will not come in the way. See, here's where I think Raviji has answered against himself, and it goes to your point in your favor in a slightly different way.
Yes. Right? Ravi contradicted everything they were agreeing upon all this while. Suddenly random एक trivial example निकाल के सब चौपाट कर दिया. Yeah, Nina, this is life. If you can watch it from the very beginning, you'll have a lot of fun. In fact, the second half of this live stream is not going that well because it's such a low IQ debate. But do watch it from the from the beginning.
You see, here is an instance where Sampradaya goes beyond Jati, correct? At least there are multiple castes involved in the administration of the temple, and where what binds them is their belief in that particular Sampradaya. Okay, that's one. Now, please consider this, and this is important in the structure that you're proposing. You see how they have accounted for this is, members from different castes of the same Sampradaya have allotted positions, but election is done within individuals for that particular position, as opposed to the rest of the Hindus from the entire district having a brute majority say over the administration of the temple and the structure of the temple. Okay, so like the caste-based electorates that was discussed at one point, you allot specific points or let's say seats, and from within the community there is an election under the assumption that, of course, rebuttable, of course, that all members of the community subscribe to that particular Sampradaya and they believe in the traditions of that particular temple. Then what happens is that nuance of ensuring that stakeholders and true stakeholders of the institution ultimately elect devout practitioners of that particular tradition or the Sampradaya are the ones who occupy that particular institution. I think my point, and this is for you to consider, it would be incorrect to actually look at this particular issue from the point of social justice. It is from the standpoint of institutional justice. Okay, which is to say,
fair enough,
what is the identity of the institution? Who are stakeholders to the institution? What is the basis for the claim of stakeholdership? And how do we ensure that they have a seat at the table when it comes to administrative structure and decision and use of resources? That is the only central contention. And that's precisely why some of these identities will have to be kept alive.
How can spirituality be a part of social justice anyway, bhai?
Because social justice will have the effect of destroying the identity along with their table at the seat. Okay? And now it's over to you. Please go ahead. Yes.
So sorry, Ashish, you've been raising your hand for some time, but I'll just respond to what Sai mentioned. Yeah, first of all, I was about to say this. I was about to say the same thing that Sai mentioned, that Raviji's point in this time, what he very eloquently mentioned, to some extent contradicted his earlier point, right? Because he clearly showed that, I'm not saying I'm saying to some extent. I'm sure there is more nuance there. I'm simply saying the one-to-one mapping of Sampradaya and Jati, by the example you gave, was undermined. The one-to-one. That's my point number one, which Sai himself mentioned. Second point is, see, I have 2-3 concerns here. I have 2-3 concerns if we say keep only those people who are interested in that mandir. There are 2-3 issues. First of all, historically, the fact that there was a lot more nuance and checks and balances is extremely good. That's what I expected it to be. But I would not be surprised that some communities fell through the cracks. While it was very diverse, it was diverse for, say, Savarnas. It may not have been. Again, there might have been exceptions. Whatever you say in India, there will be exceptions. But as a general rule, that while there was a Shudra, while there was somebody from a martial caste, while there was somebody else from a trading caste, maybe the people who were Avarnas, people who were Dalits or local tribals, they fell through the cracks. And while you're counting them as Hindus in the census, for all practical purposes, that social fraternity is not there. That's point number one on your historical analogy. Now, going forward, I think what Sai is proposing is very interesting. It could be practicable, but there are 2 problems I have with that. First of all, I resent the fact, if at all, I'm not saying Sai proposed that, I'm saying if it ends up as that I am in a locality, one Hindu is only connected to one Sampradaya. For me, that is an Abrahamic way of thinking. I always give the example, it's well known in Japan, if you add the number of Buddhists, Shintos, and other people, the number exceeds 100%. So first of all, there should not be even if you don't want to do a general population and you want to say, for example, only those connected to that mandir, even if you do that hypothetically, I don't want it to be limited to 1. Now, that does not mean that everybody gets to sign for everything, but it should be some larger number, 2, 3, or 4. You already start seeing the complexities, right? Because I don't want to say that is my only particular temple I care about. Because for me, that conceding of the normative point is something not worth doing, number one. And which is why the general local adult franchise does not have that problem. Now, the other problem is, see, historically, and this is where because we are designing a new system. See, 1905, when France passed the Laicite Act, right? They had a set of Catholic temples which they had to denationalize. In a way, they were going through the same problems in 1905 in France that we are going through now. Although the context was Abrahamic there, the context is Dharmic there, and therefore there is a difference. But they had to go through the problems of what do they do with Catholic churches that were hitherto under the state. My problem is, if going forward we say only that local sampradaya, I am not seeing a Hindu politicization because there is no intermingling of those Dalits who were never there in that particular sampradaya, and they will never get a chance to come, for example, and intermingle. So either there should be an online way of saying that I can immediately, that every particular local Hindu has 2 sampradayas he can subscribe to for local temple voting rights, and he can change it at any moment, because I don't want it to be fixed for life. I know that if I go from Calcutta to Bombay, it is very difficult to change my voting ID card. I want to make sure that if I change my sampradaya over time, I get to go from temple A to temple B in locality in terms of my voting. So there are a lot of issues which I don't want to end up de facto accepting the old social stratification. In terms of this, I want to.
You are saying that despite being an outsider to a sampradaya, you still want some kind of a say in the sampradaya of your choice.
Very explicitly, yes.
I agree with Madhusudan here a lot, but after all, there's one little problem that can only be solved with good disposable income, which leads to good education and critical thinking, and even atheism in a way. That if someone believes in the particular deity in a particular temple where they are themselves not being allowed to enter, you are supposed to reject that institution, not go on hoping and begging to get into that institution. That kind of self-respect, though, I think it's, I guess, too much to hope for.
Can I just come in, please? So I am a Marwari from Jhunjhunu, okay, traditionally. So our faith is in the Jhunjhunu Mandir, which is the Rani Sati Mandir. So we worship the Sati Mata over there, okay? No matter where I am in the country, my Kula Devi and my faith and my, everything is going to be connected with the Mandir in Jhunjhunu. Now, tomorrow, if I up and about get up and say, all right, I think I'm going to change and I don't want to believe in that anymore. I'm going to now start believing in some other temple. I'm going to now, I opt to be a devotee of, Kalima. I opt to be a devotee of Kalima, and I deserve a voting right as to whether Bali should be, Bali should be carried on in her temple or not. Why should I get that right specifically when we're talking only in the structure of the voting system that you're speaking about? Otherwise, Hindus are free to believe in whichever deity they wish.
Yeah.
But so, how can we have this, fluidity that whenever I want to vote in the traditions of any temple, I can up and about on a whim change my sampradaya, is what I'm trying to ask you.
No, so my point is very simple. As Hindus, if you're allowed to change your belief or the focal point of your belief, or at the same time believe in multiple things, then you're allowed to. Now you are using a possible situation where somebody is doing this cynically. Now that point is there. That danger remains. That danger remains even with the historical patrons or the fiduciary trustees of the temple. So this whole point by the
birth Hindus should be allowed to have a say in what happens in Sabrimala. Are we saying that?
No. We did not even go that far. We did not even go that far because the starting point was local Hindus. For the starting point was the two-tiered structure where all local Hindus get a vote in all local temples, but the historical fiduciary trustees of that temple get super delegate votes in that temple. So there is no question of me suddenly voting in Sabrimala because I don't live there or I don't have domicile there.
When you go from Calcutta to Mumbai, you need to know that you can change your sampradaya at will. That is the point of contention. That then now SJW from South Bombay, who is Marwari by birth, who has no idea about the temple traditions of Sabrimala, for example, can up and about go and say that, all right, now I'm going to have a say in what happens to the traditions of that temple.
Yes, which is I totally.
That is a double-edged sword. You have to deal with it. Our laws are temporal, and we are discussing ecclesiastical matters here. ये तो थोड़ा तो खिटमिट रहेगा ही, थोड़ा conflict रहेगा ही, imperfection रहेगा ही.
You see the point. There are Hindus and there are Hindus that have maximum diversity, which is why I think the super delegate point makes sure that unless all the people in that voting population are SJWs, one would assume that along with super delegates and a fraction, because see, I don't think nobody understood. If you are in Sabrimala, there is the proposal that Amar and Rakesh made was that you have local voting rights in a particular geographical area. I am adding on top of that a proposal which I think is more conservative, that you give the historical trustees some disproportional rights, whatever the number.
My issue is not with that. My issue is with the mobility of sampradaya that you mentioned.
I think they have a few points to make as well. Let's perhaps give them some opportunity, if that's okay.
No, I am only saying that if a person is living near Sabrimala temple and is clearly not a devotee, and if a person is living 500 kilometers away from the temple and is a devotee, the person who is living near Sabrimala should get more rights or more skin in the game. Why? That doesn't make any sense.
It can be done. In today's electronic age, it can be done. That's a good proposal. It need not be location based. It could be nationally. You choose which.
Then you are basically saying that it should be based only for the devotees. We can enroll the devotees themselves.
But devotees will always be self-declared. There cannot be a litmus test for devotees. So people who will be cynical will slip through. But I agree with you. It need not be geographical based. Well, one has to assume that. But I agree that your proposal is interesting. It need not be geography based.
I think we can move on to Ashish. I think his hand is going to start aching.
No, so I just wanted to bring it back to a more general
Kashmiri Pandit ko koi nahi deta. I'm so sorry. Please.
Don't light a new fire, Sai.
No, so I want to go back and this has been a great session, but I don't want to give this impression of again going back to Harsh has been put through too many questions on temple thing also. But because I was there first,
Slightly louder.
First, so I'll just okay, yeah. Sorry. So my question, I'll come to the question immediately. You mentioned about your first Sai said that about cultural Marxism. I have a comment there. When I go through the study of jatis.
Niner, oh my God, is now setting some foxes in the hen house.
And caste-based problems in India. I am at a loss to find any credible economic analysis done by Marxists, not cultural Marxists. Cultural Marxists ki to baat chhod do. Marxists themselves have not, which is supposedly their bread and butter. So I don't know what kind of study is going on when it is pretty clear where the problems lie. Now, my question, and I would request Harsh to wear his economist hat here. When you say that you want to obliterate jati, the concept itself, right?
We are back to that. Nice.
So as an economist, how do you actually, can you just take us through what
does an economist have to do with this?
When you say that you want to give up jati, what you're saying is that you want to give up on 2000 years at least of craftsmanship, of skill, which has developed.
Fair enough. But, and Harsh Madhusudan's demand is kind of, or hope is kind of ambiguous to begin with. But again, यहाँ पे अगर 2000 years लाते हैं, तो it would have to imply that specific lineages, family lineages were in that specific profession and jati for 2000 years. Do our genetic studies say that? कि भाई 2025 में अगर कोई let's say वेप मेकिंग कास्ट में है तो वो 2000 साल पहले भी वेप ही बनाता था. उसके एंसेस्टर्स, उसके ब्लड एंसेस्टर्स 2000 साल पहले वेप ही बनाते थे. ऐसा कहाँ पे कोई स्टडी है? ये देखो, commies, leftists, right wingers, Raita strats have, all of them have this weird agreement and a blind spot about caste.
Developed over all these years and has come to us as products of some amazing products, whether it is textile, whether it is glass cutting, diamond cutting, kuch bhi le lo, right? So when you are saying that you are
Sika ancestor थोड़ी कर रहा था
jati and you want to finish it, don't you think that one, you are giving up on all that heritage that is economic?
अगर कोई sarcastically बोलता कि हाँ भाई 3000 साल का एट्रोसिटी, तो भाई 3000 साल का अगर एट्रोसिटी नहीं था तो 2000 साल से भाई कोई बकेट भी नहीं बना रहा था सेम फैमिली में.
In nature, not even cultural. I'm not talking about the great temples and stuff. I'm just talking about economic. And then you are actually forcing these communities to have a violent clash with modernity, and telling them to now you should also migrate to cities because we are urbanizing, and we are all supposed to be living in metros one day, and therefore you should leave your village and now migrate and work as a laborer in some factory. So don't you think that is what it actually means?
So I'll just answer. I know you were saying it with the right intentions, but it was a bit colloquial. So I just want to kind of paraphrase and make sure the point. I'm not trying to force anybody. As I mentioned, I'm not even sure if I want to use the state's existing policies of subsidizing intercaste marriage. I'm not even sure if I support that. So the forcing part, I think you're trying to say I'm forcibly saying or advocating, that I can agree with. I'm definitely not trying to force anybody. I think including through state policy, not
force na ho. It is okay. But
I understood your point. I'll mention that. I understood. Normatively, that is my end. And I'll explain to you why it's not a problem the way you mentioned it. See, first of all, a doctor's son can be a doctor. I'm not saying that if a doctor's son becomes a doctor, it's bad. I'm not saying that. My problem was with a system which normatively said that a person who cleans the toilet, his son should not be a doctor. My problem is with that. But अगर doctor का बेटा doctor बन रहा है, मुझे कोई problem नहीं है. So it's important to understand. Now on the point of in economic.
No, Aniket, I know you are agreeing with me, but I'm not even saying that this is not the case. I'm saying, yes, one particular caste name might be involved in one particular profession for 2000 years. वो भी ठीक है. मगर one particular person's blood lineage was going back 2000 years in that exact same jati. That's not, I think, proven or claimed by anyone. But what people are considering it to be, are thinking it is, they are just forgetting that this is not the case.
I mean, it is what trend was
affirmative action.
No, can you just you continue with it? I won't interfere. Answer the question.
This brings to my mind another statistical fallacy that commies do in the US, and Thomas Sowell points this out, that okay, some commies say that okay, if you all say capitalism ensures economic upward mobility, where's the proof of it? There's no upward mobility in USA. And then they might say, see this particular area, all these people who are in this tax bracket or wealth bracket or income bracket, all that similar number of people are in that same bracket even today. Thomas Sowell points out why the fuck that is. Because the people who actually had that upward mobility no longer lived in that fucking place. They have shifted elsewhere. That place now has further poorer people or even illegal immigrants who have now come here. तो भाई एक फैमिली को ट्रैक करके वो क्लेम नहीं किया जा रहा है, वो एक प्लेस का रैंडम हिसाब दिया जा रहा है. तो कैसे होगा? फिर से गरीब लोग आ गए हैं तो बोल दिया कि अच्छा देखो, अगर कोई जगह का नाम है लेट्स से टेक्सासपुर, तो टेक्सासपुर में अपवर्ड मोबिलिटी नहीं है, क्योंकि टेक्सासपुर में 10 साल पहले भी लोग 10 रुपए कमाते थे, आज भी 10 रुपए कमा रहे हैं भोसड़ी के. कहां हुआ अपवर्ड मोबिलिटी कैपिटलिज्म में? क्योंकि जो लोग 20 रुपए बना रहे थे वो तो टेक्सासपुर छोड़ के एलेपुर चले गए हैं. यही प्रॉब्लम है इन दिस जाति कॉन्टेक्स्ट एज वेल.
Question on dignity of labor as well, if you believe that's the case, and you believe that there is a hierarchy of professions also.
Yes, I'll mention that, because you can always say, what's wrong with cleaning toilets? There is dignity of labor. My point.
Neenar, because today, of course, jati is not that, but it had to. Historically, it has to be considered that, because today it is just rituals, status, and lineage. It's not even status today, but at some point, it started based on a profession. Then that profession gave them a certain kind of status, and they. Since they had their own consumption patterns, they had their own separate rituals and lineage.
But it's very simple. There should be choice. Nobody should say if you are cleaning toilets, your father cleaned toilets, therefore you should clean toilets. Now, if somebody's father cleaned toilets and he wants to clean toilets, despite being educated, fine. I'm not sure how many will choose that, but I'm fine with that. So let us be very clear, because it can be used. And
भाई थोड़े ईडनिस्ट बनने दो ना लोगों को. अरे इतना क्यों तुम लोग ऐसे करते हो इन लोगों के साथ? थोड़ा प्राइड लेने दो. 2000 साल से बढ़िया इंडस्ट्री बनाए थे.
Is right. It can be said, are you using dignity of labor? Do you have a white collar bias? Do you have an anti-blue collar bias? It can be said. So I'm just making that very clear. Now, on an economist angle point of view, I actually don't think the craft heritage and all that from an economic point of view is that relevant for most people. I'm not saying for all people. I think the most interesting economic part of caste, and actually R. Vaidyanathan has written a book called Caste as Social Capital. I think that is very interesting of caste. And I say that as somebody who's born in a Vaishya family, Baniya family, so-called Marwari family, not from Rajasthan, but from Haryana. See, I tell you what, if I'm today doing small trading, and I do not believe in the courts implementing the contract I have with the person I'm trading, because I know practically on the
Varun Dev, in which context are you talking about this? That what did happen?
Ground, if I go on the route of litigation, then paisa pata nahi kab milega 10-20 saal baad. The only people who will get rich are lawyers, either like Sai or my wife, right? I will actually get money or not is a long time question. So for me, even though I may want to trade with a non-Baniya, a person who's from a non-Baniya background, because historically, not in my particular case, I'm saying in a general case, जो बोलते हैं ना कि बेटी खाने का, what is caste on the ground? तो ये बेटी खाने का रिश्ता जिधर है, जहाँ पे बेटी का रिश्ता है, जहाँ पे खाने का रिश्ता है. So historically, the way caste worked, for example, for these mercantile communities was, if somebody gave you dhoka, you could shame them in the biradari. Right? That is how it worked. Now, that is a pre-modern state system. Come to a modern state system where we are transitioning, where if I have a contract with Arihant, let us say, who is not from my...
अगर ये है तब तो भाई वो जाति का हुआ ही नहीं वो. Again, my point stands vindicated here.
My caste background, and I know that if Arihant frauds me or if I defraud him, both of us can quickly go to court and get justice on that particular point. Then that social capital, while not becoming fully irrelevant, becomes much less important. Similarly, if you have a social safety net, I think you made a point about caste being social safety net, that is historically true. But again, if you now have welfare schemes, which are increasingly, not always, India is not exactly like a country, and increasingly identity agnostic, not fully either caste or religion, but increasingly, like I give EWS as a step of normatively going towards economic or material deprivation, as a criteria and not identitarian ones. Then that again caste as social capital, whether in the case of poor people, whether in the case of people who are trading, whether in the case of people who are collaborating on some art projects, becomes much less important. Therefore, a modern state, historical occupations or caste as profession, it becomes very difficult to normally, organically sustain. So Harsh is not trying to force people out of it. I am prognosticating, I am projecting that it is likely to die a de facto slow death. That does not mean that there will be zero people following their professions. That's my point.
Courts today are actually asking people to look at alternative dispute resolution mechanisms without coming to court because our courts are clogged. And tomorrow, courts decide to effectively empower trade guilds or caste guilds. So, for instance, one of the things that I remember, at least from my limited reading of the Mahabharata, is Krishna's belief in the pressure of the Kshatriya community on Duryodhana to improve his conduct when he refused to give them their kingdom back after the 13-year pun. Okay, which is to say there is social opprobrium, there is social pressure from people who you are expected to mingle with. Okay, so in light of the fact, in fact, that's one of the reasons that I strongly believe that institutions such as the Khap Panchayats or guilds have been vilified beyond the point so much, because it clearly tells me that the people who have vilified them have had a clear Marxist bent of mind, who wanted to effectively say this is how the caste system works. The cup is full of people from the upper caste community who effectively have a Gotra obsession, and all they do is to keep going after honor killings. That's all they decided to focus on, other than focusing on all other dispute resolution mechanisms that the Khap Panchayat presents and other opportunities, right? So I am saying that even from the standpoint of dispensation of justice, I'm not saying from a criminal standpoint, of course, the state reserves the sole power over criminal justice system. I'm very clear about that. And that was always the structure before and after the modern state. However, with respect to disputes which are commercial in nature, which are resolvable, so to speak, it is possible for caste, as Dr. Vaidyanathan actually presents in his book, to be seen as a limited and an immediate, let's say.
Wait, Varun, so you are saying that chamars who used to make chappals with their hands, basically their profession got disrupted because industries could do that job, right? So this is that classic technology upgrade disrupting people's lives, that kind of a situation, right? Yeah, so the specific castes who were affected with or busy with just that profession, and that profession goes tits up one fine morning, so yeah, definitely they will get affected. So yeah, but we can't prevent industrialization because of that. Like Jyoti Basu said, let's not have computers in Bengal, or let's not have English in Bengal. That also solidified someone of the other's caste. If like because of computers, many typewriters lost their job. There used to be a huge typewriting industry, countless typewriters right outside of the university. All of their jobs are gone. That typewriting caste has disappeared today. So kya kare?
Mechanism to dispense justice. So one, if clearly we have a proprietarial right perspective, you also have a justice dispensation mechanism. You also see it as a safety net. Then the only question remains, what is that overriding socio-economic, political, religious consideration that pushes us to kill this structure altogether, to say, while it may be inevitable, I also believe it is desirable. That is the only thing that perhaps I think where you and I disagree. Other than that, I think we have fortunately reached this. So, Arihant has been waiting.
I'll quickly mention before Arihant goes, or Arihant, whatever the moderators decide, I'll quickly go first.
No, you go.
Please go.
Okay, so I'll mention, you're right. So obviously now that we're having a nuanced discussion, we obviously find that there are
Lighter is saying, Chandogya Upanishad 5.10.7 says, caste is based on birth. Your thoughts? And it's Shruti which holds authority over Shiv Purana, which is a Smriti. I was talking about Brahma Purana in which Shiva says this. But see, first of all, no one cares about these hierarchies. No one cares what's in the end written on every page and line of the text. If someone actually cared about these texts, no one would go on writing different texts with different sayings. तो वो हायरार्की सिग्निफिकेंट है ही नहीं, इरेलेवेंट है एब्सोल्युटली कि नहीं दिस वन बाईपासेस ब्रह्मपुराण. भाई ब्रह्मपुराण बाईपास करता है तो ब्रह्मपुराण जिन लोगों ने लिखा वो क्या कर रहे थे? उन लोगों को पता नहीं था कि देखिए छंदोग्य उपनिषद में तो बोल दिया है क्या करे ब्रह्मपुराण लिख के. नहीं लिखते हैं, बैठे रहते. किसी ने लिखा, बहुत सारे लोगों ने पढ़ा, किस लिए? कुछ लोगों के लिए ब्रह्मपुराण वाज मोर इंपॉर्टेंट देन छंदोग्य उपनिषद. ओके, टेक्स्ट are not a dictative thing in Indian society. Texts are a repository of the sign and times of that era. How that culture was trying to tell its own story. उसके अलावा कुछ भी तुम read into करोगे text से, तुम खाई में डूब जाओगे.
A lot of overlapping analyses, but there is a difference in our normative end goal, and I'll say why. The state penetration during the Mughal times was at level let us say level 1. During the British times, it went to level 2. Like, for example, the disarming of the peasantry in the 1820s, and especially after 1857, which Gandhi later called, I mean, the so-called pacifist Gandhi said was the most black letter law, that the disarming of the Indian peasantry. Now we are going to state, what I say, not intervention, state penetration into our lives at level 3 in modern times. You know, there is a very famous book by a Yale scholar called Seeing Like a State. So when you have something like Aadhaar, you have a number. I can go and see that this is the commercial record, this is the medical record, this is the history of driving license. All of that can be come out on a relational database management system on a computer in 1 second today. It was simply not possible even 10 or 15 years ago. And therefore, the question is, while the CUP is providing justice, yes, hopefully not on the criminal side, on the civil side, as of the moment, I see it not as a good thing. I see it as a necessary thing for the moment, because quick justice on the civilian and commercial has not reached that level yet. So as a substitute for failure of state capacity, it is better for somebody to dispense some imperfect justice, better than there being anarchy. But the problem is that while people will focus on the honor killings, while people will focus on the patriarchal or the caste angle, those realities are still there. So would we not want, ideally, if the state capacity improves, that Khap Panchayat dispensing system also be replaced with a modern state system? But so you can have the nuance of acknowledging that it is providing civilian justice albeit in an imperfect sense. But why not the normative end goal being that you actually have proper state-based justice?
अरे now Harsh Madhusudan is saying सरकार को कुछ करना चाहिए.
Even for non-criminal things at the local level in a cheap, transparent, and fast manner. So that is the normative idea where we are.
Fast manner.
Now, the same manner in which you took a position with respect to Khap Panchayats, where you said it is a necessity and more of a moral judgment. Okay. Wouldn't you agree that was the same tone and tenor in which Ashish effectively put out his tweet, wherein he said this was more of an exigency as a safety net and necessity of that particular cycle, and he wasn't taking a moral position on that. Just one. Second, assuming that Khap Panchayat actually has a lot of warts, and I'm not going to be the one to pixelate or airbrush it, are we saying let's throw the baby out with the bathwater, or shall we address the issues with that particular system as opposed to completely rendering it redundant and infructuous? Because the way
Deepak is conceptually right, but they are not just warts. They are not a bug. They are a feature of that software.
Across the globe is decentralization of dispensation of civil form of justice in every jurisdiction as much as possible, because the state has proven to be.
No, Eke Brahmo. Then we can't talk against Shalishi Shobhas in Bengal or the specific Sharia villages of Bengal. They are also arbiters.
Completely incompetent, useless when it comes to dispensation of justice at every level. The state has an interest today only in dispensing justice if it hogs headlines and if it has political mileage. But otherwise, the common man, I say this with a lot of responsibility of 11 years under the belt, is sick and tired of coming to the courts. Sunny Deol remains right even today after all these years of Damini. Okay, that's a fact.
So I'll very quickly respond to that. Right. Absolutely. I don't know where we are disagreeing, because obviously Sunny Deol's image of Tariq after Tariq is the reason why the common person is sick and tired of the judiciary. And hence, institutions like the CUP, the pre-modern institutions like the CUP, are filling in that vacuum. That does not mean that we say because the vacuum has already been filled, let us not double down on.
Polymerase, it's a weird debate. Everyone is right to a certain degree. Everyone is wrong to a certain degree in this debate.
More easily, more rapidly, more transparently, and more affordably available. You see the difference. We can acknowledge that. So my point is that therefore I want the end goal that the average person in a village or a small town can go to a local just to say, this was our agreement. This is the agreement. I have been defrauded, and this is what the contract says. I need to be given this. Or, for example, once the land records get digitized, a large part of the fights go away. So because then the problem is we cannot, as you rightly mentioned, pixelate away the warts of the Khap Panchayats, where somebody says,
But all I'm saying is they are not warts. They are not bugs of that system. They are features of that software.
Intercaste marriage kariye, therefore aapko is village se nikal diya. It is not acceptable. Therefore, we have to go towards a modern sense of justice while recognizing that in the transition, the vacuum is being filled by certain pre-modern institutions.
Yeah, and on this particular issue, this very specific context, Harsh Madhusudan's hope is सरकार को कुछ करना चाहिए, जो कि लड़े कुछ नहीं करेंगे वैसे भी, or who have a bad record when it comes to delivering justice.
Now, on the point of Ashish, since you mentioned, I'll agree. I've said very clearly. Since we brought this issue back again, I read Kushal.
Imagine being Narendra Modi, guys. We are having a tough time listening to this debate of just 6 people who are pretty intelligent, pretty well read. Imagine the kind of stuff Narendra Modi has to deal with and listen to.
Asking Ashish, what is your view? On that, Ashish gave what was effectively the reason why something existed earlier. Ashish, after that, again wrote that I'm not even sure if I have a view, but I consider reformism to be self-congratulatory bakwas.
Oh, there's a context to this polymerist. They are discussing Khap Panchayats because Ashish Dhar is a huge fan of Khap Panchayats. And he says that you should not look at Khap Panchayats just because of honored killing. हाँ, honored killing थोड़ा बहुत करते होंगे, मगर भाई रात में security भी देते हैं, अब तक क्या करें?
And there are more tweets. So what I saw was that while officially there was a point of not taking a view, de facto, the reform stand versus the traditional stand was abused. And therefore, I think based on those facts, ex post facto, I was right to come to the conclusion that Ashish supports a birth-based system while he is refusing to say that publicly and explicitly, which is perfectly fine. If today, right now, Ashish says something different in a Bayesian sense, I will recalculate my logical conclusion and I will right now publicly say, well, I was wrong to call you casteist. But because normatively, Ashish has right now, even not right now, said that he disagrees with the birth-based system. Therefore, with all due respect, and not as an ad hominem, but as a descriptor, I stand by my words.
Ashish, before you respond, I'm not on the issue, just one thing. Harsh, as any practitioner will tell you, the influence of caste and religion in modern dispensation of justice continues in every structure. Neither CAP was an exception, and nor is the current modern justice dispensation an exception. You know this better than anybody else, considering how Hindu traditions have been uniquely at the receiving end of certain forms of intervention. That is not applicable only at the Hindu or the religious level, that is equally applicable at the caste level in several organs without attracting any provisions of existing law. Let me just tell you that who occupies a certain position at which particular level is decided largely, continues to be decided largely by caste arithmetic and caste dynamic almost every place. So 70 years of our experience has proven to be a failure to demolish this creature called caste.
अच्छा, ऐसे कैसे चलेगा? नहीं, ये सब नहीं चलेगा, ये सब बोलने से. See, when you hit a fucking wall because you don't look at caste as status, you come up with insane conclusions on every side of the aisle. Now, जैसा Deepak is saying, देखिए, and casteism तो हटा नहीं, तो चलो रह नहीं देते हैं casteism. This is the argument. और कॉमिजा saying नहीं, और थोड़ा और कुछ साल ट्राई कर लेते हैं, अब तक तो नहीं हुआ मगर अब हो जाएगा, और कुछ साल जब तक नहीं होता है, infinitely करते रहो जब तक सॉल्व नहीं होता है.
That's fine, and I know Arihant again has his fingers up, but because Sai, you mentioned this to me, I just have to quickly respond. I agree that the current present formal state-based justice system is not perfect. I'm not a lawyer, but anybody who's married to a doctor or lawyer becomes a half doctor or a half lawyer. However, terribly, I have my own old random rants on the basic structure doctrine and so on. Having said that, we cannot have a false equivalence between the imperfections of the modern state system and the pre-modern system, for example, the Khap Panchayat. What I mean by that is, and there is a broader point here, and I think we don't want to go into discussion. I also saw a tweet about yours saying we do not trust the state about UCC. But the reason I'm mentioning that point here is because it is connected. 70 years, we as Hindus have had a bad experience where the state is dividing us, but that is not good enough for us to give up on our own state. We are 75 to 80% of the population. How can we give up in an independent democracy on our own state? Just because we have failed so far to get a certain normative point doesn't mean that this is an alien state. There is a conceptual difference between state and society, but the state eventually is being represented by us. And therefore, my difference is perhaps on the optimism about being able to modify for our betterment the state. And that also answers the point on the future of the caste and therefore the judicial modern system.
A strong Hindu social institutional network will result in the creation of a strong Hindu identity state, is my humble opinion. And therefore, if societal institutions and civilizational bedrocks, which effectively stitch this particular country together and the civilization together, are weakened from temple structures to societal structures, to say that our vote will matter ultimately, it will not, because already demographically we are being outnumbered. The only thing that is saving us today is the limited safety net today of the limited and small micro identities that we have managed to create ourselves, because that tells us at least they will come to our support. The reason why the Dalit is able to survive in streets and localities where he's outnumbered by other communities is because in the hope that at least his organizations will come to his aid. I'm not saying that therefore other organizations and other Hindus should not go to their aid. By the way, I believe that's one of the failings, and that's something that we must do. I'm not on that particular issue. But
I'll let
one sec. I'm going to first pose a question to Ashish because I think our.
अरे मेरे को करने दो फिर मेरा related है.
Ashish पूछ रहे हो?
हाँ, because so I have to come in.
Please ask.
Yeah. So I just want to point out, because Sai and others also support the diversity of cultures, traditions to be preserved as they are to the most of the extent, right? And we talked about Khap. I just want to tell you one incident and their idea of justice. I mean, of course, there are so many good examples also. I'm just pointing out that there was a inter-gotra marriage where, the people of the same village, they got married and the idea of justice from the local khap was to have the girl tie Rakhi to her husband. So what is the extent to which we want them or our local communities empower if it is in contradiction with our constitution or the modern basic human rights or whatever? So how do we reconcile that? How much power to be given to that? And I'm asking this because you also say that you are not convinced about the idea of uniform civil code. So if we are going to have different codes as per the communities, how do we reconcile that they are also in conformation with the today's standards and practices, basic human rights and all that?
ये सवाल किस पे डायरेक्टेड है, मैं उसके हिसाब से जवाब दूंगा. आप आशीष से पूछ रहे हैं?
आशीष, साई, रवि, anybody can answer.
ये तो लॉ में मेरे पे ग्रेड से ऊपर है, तो ये
साई के नाम से
एक ही बंदा आंसर कर सकता है.
मैं इसका जवाब दे देता हूं. ओके, इस पे 3 levels of responses हैं, and I'm partly responding to certain assumptions of both Harsh and you, Arihant, especially you. ये बात मुझे आपको ये जरूर बताना है. Here I would urge you, and this is not self-edification, I would really urge you to read my pieces on decoloniality on this particular aspect, क्योंकि इस पूरे डिस्कशन में 2 शब्दों का बार-बार प्रयोग हुआ है. एक है मॉडर्निटी और दूसरा है ट्रेडिशन. ओके, एंड हमने हर बार ये दोहराया है इस assumption को that tradition stands for something which is outdated and anachronistic, and modern stands for something that has contemporary purchase. Okay, I'm basically making the statement: tradition followed without any kind of understanding leads to superstition. I'm very, very clear about that. Okay, and the fundamental principle that Hindu dharma has followed and Hindu tradition has followed is almost similar to the Roman or let's say the Latin maxim, cessat ratio, cessat ipsa lex. The moment the reason for the existence of the law ceases to exist, the law ceases to exist. Okay, तो आप अपने आप से सवाल क्या करेंगे? आज के देश काल समय में ऐसे कितने संप्रदाय हैं, कितने प्रथाएं हैं, कितनी मान्यताएं हैं जो कहां पे लागू हो सकते हैं, और यहाँ पे क्या क्या आप डिस्टिंक्शन स्ट्राइक करेंगे? एक है सोशल लेवल पे, दूसरा है रिलीजियस लेवल पे. What is it that we are trying to do? Society चाहे कितना भी चेंज करते जाए, at least with respect to religious institutions, what remains a tradition must not be interfered with, because the calculation there is very different, and societal equations and social equations are very, very different. Okay, so in applying what is modern, in applying what is relevant, let us at least strike a distinction between societal spaces, secular spaces, religious spaces, non-secular spaces, and to be clear of that particular distinction. That distinction remains all the more valid in the context of a modern state. That's one. 2.
Yeah, so Harsh knows that.
How do we reconcile the question of all these decentralized justice dispensation mechanisms with the central state whom we have actually put together, and we have decided to be a part of this voluntarily? जिस घर में आपने रहने का डिसीजन ले लिया है और जिसको आपने बनाया है, आप खुद उस पर थोड़ी थूक सकते हैं. Doesn't make sense. Okay. Now, for me, there are 2 ways of going about it. One, the state decides to play an overarching role, okay, and decides to swamp and finish all existing traditional justice dispensation structures altogether to say, I will fill that vacuum. The problem with that is twofold. One, it is going against the current tide of decentralization across jurisdictions. Second, the Indian state is yet to prove to me that it is competent to do so. So there are twofold responses to this. Point number 3, assuming that ये सभी ठीक होता, 1 मिनट के लिए ये सोच लीजिए, you're looking at a population of 1.3 billion, and you're effectively expecting courts to step into the picture for everything with multiple tiers of appeals, and this is a cost-extensive exercise. Okay? So to the extent that the state really wants to enforce a uniform civil code, here's what I would basically say. आप हमारे रिलीजियस संप्रदाय जितने भी हैं, मंदिरों को उनको छोड़ दीजिए, उसके साथ छेड़छाड़ मत कीजिए, ये आपके समझ के बाहर है. Okay? Point number 1. But where it comes to the question of personal laws, my exhortation has not been I'm against the uniform civil code. I've only said I need 2 things. You're talking of modern state. The modern state is meant to be participative in nature. हमारे साथ बातचीत कीजिए, संवाद शुरू कीजिए. आप जो नेहरू ने किया था वो हमारे साथ मत कीजिए. You ask us, we are stakeholders. Give us the respect of being stakeholders. 3, आपके दिमाग में क्या है, ये you please place it before the public.
ये stakeholder argument ना बहुत ambiguous है, and I don't know why Deepak is forgetting this aspect. भाई stakeholder वोट लेके जीता है, वो ऑलरेडी स्टेक होल्डर ही है. फिर वो वापस जिसने वोट दिया है उसको कितना सीरियसली लेगा? अगर लेना ही है तो फिर वो आर्गुमेंट फिर से आ जाएगा कि एग्जैक्टली विच स्टेक होल्डर, फ्रॉम विच कास्ट, फ्रॉम विच लिनिएज, एंड हाउ डू वी जज हाउ मच स्टेक होल्डर ही इज. क्योंकि अगेन द ब्रिटिश सिचुएशन, British came here, talked to Tamil Brahmins and Bengali Brahmins and decided that okay, this is what the caste system is, and 50 years later, 100 years later, decolonialists say that no, traditional scholars were not consulted, ऐसे ही खुद से ही बना के लिख दिया होगा. तो कंसल्ट करे तो किसके साथ करे? स्टेक होल्डर है ऑलरेडी. This is again similar to the debate of शेयर होल्डर कैपिटलिज्म वर्सेस स्टेक होल्डर कैपिटलिज्म। जिन लोगों ने पैसे दे के रखा है उस कंपनी को, उसका ओपिनियन इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है। जिसने पैसा नहीं दिया है उस कंपनी को, जो कि ऐसे रैंडम सिटीजन है, उसका ओपिनियन लिया जाएगा। स्टेक होल्डर कैपिटलिज्म, बाईपासिंग द रियल फकिंग प्रोडक्ट, रियल फकिंग थिंग दैट एग्जिस्ट इन फ्रंट ऑफ योर आईज for some ambiguous abstract hot shit. What the fuck? And this is similar to that situation as well, that any chief minister who has a direct phone line to him or her is a really great chief minister. Okay, तो भाई लौड़े बाकियों को सैलरी क्यों दे रहे हैं? Why should the chief minister listen to my phone calls? They are supposed to do other stuff. It means you have completely failed as a chief minister, which is why you have to take my phone calls. Stakeholder तो जो पार्लियामेंट में गया है, हमने भेजा है पैसा देके, इतना पैसा खर्च करके इलेक्शन होता है, वो स्टेक होल्डर नहीं है तो कौन है वो? उसके ऊपर एक लेयर ऑफ स्टेक होल्डर। ये वो आर्गुमेंट जैसा है। हमारे व्यूअर्स में एक लड़का था, कॉमी था थोड़ा, अभी उतना कॉमी नहीं है, बोल रहा था व्हाई डोंट वी हैव सम ओवरसाइट फॉर दिस करप्ट बाबूज। तो भाई ओवरसाइट कौन करेगा? एक और बाबू। द लोकपाल बिल वाज हॉट शिट फॉर द सेम रीजन। लोकपाल कौन है? ये लोग कौन, क्या पालना करेंगे?
सर्जिकल स्ट्राइक का कॉन्सेप्ट आप यूसीसी में मत कीजिए, इसके रिएक्शंस अलग तरीके से होंगे, सभी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन होंगे, इसका दावा तो मैं नहीं कर सकता क्योंकि सब कुछ मेरे हाथ में नहीं है। चौथा, when it comes to institutions at the village level or anywhere else, my response is going to be very, very simple. Please don't approach them with the elitist nature, let's say attitude of an urban Indian or an English educated Indian. वो उनको अंग्रेजी नहीं आती है, इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि उनके पास दिमाग नहीं है या उनके पास संस्कार नहीं है. Let us not act as two products of Macaulay. Okay, that's one. Two, जहां पे आपको लगता है कि वो हस्तक्षेप एक हद से ज्यादा कर रहे हैं, even then I would say you discuss, and I will tell you why. ट्रिपल तलाक के बारे में आपने जजमेंट के बिना कोई डिसीजन नहीं लिया और जो लेजिस्लेशन आया है वो कोर्ट के कहने पे आया है, वरना भारत का कोई सरकार चाहे कोई भी हो, they will not have the guts to have initiated that particular discussion in the blind, keeping the community in the dark, especially in the backdrop of the Shabano experience. Okay, and the one experience fortunately that the Hindus have stood up together, in fact two experiences in my living memory, in my 34 years of staying on this planet, in this mortal coil, is Jallikattu and Sabarimala, which is effectively telling me that the community is saying enough is enough, don't force us to adopt the never again motto. Okay, talk to us, give us the respect. The top-down approach is the sign of a colonizing power. If you are my power and you are the product of my power, you belong to.
Sai Sridhar, are you open to reading books or podcasts and stuff? If you are looking for podcasts and stuff, the only place I suggest to check out is our playlist in the College Street Kolkata channel. There's a playlist called Caste or Caste Discussion, Caste Papers ऐसा कुछ है, वहाँ पे जाओ, नहीं तो check out our discussions with mysterious sociologist on caste. No, surnames are not associated with any particular Gotra, right?
To my society, talk to me, don't take a decision without me. मैं एंड गोल की बात नहीं कर रहा हूं. अगर समझ लीजिए सारे के सारे लोग अल्टीमेटली कन्विंस हो जाते हैं कि खप की कोई जरूरत नहीं है, why will a Sai Deepak alone stand there with a लाल झंडा? कोई फर्क थोड़ी पड़ेगा. कम्युनिटी ने डिसीजन ले लिया है, बात खत्म. Okay? Therefore, there the question will be of reconciling the expectation of participative process with what is it that the state wants to achieve, but most importantly, the state will need to clarify not just what it wants to achieve, why it wants to achieve something, the desirability of something. जब तक उस why का जवाब नहीं मिलता है, I will keep talking like a Raktabij Rakshas. I will keep asking this question. जवाब दो, जवाब दो, जवाब दो. That's all I have to say.
ठीक है, ये this is from the legal perspective, Sai. If Ashish or Ravi can talk from the moral perspective, from the society perspective, from the Hindu side, so that I am more interested in rather than the legal one.
I think I don't have much to say on it because ultimately the nuances of it are legal in nature and in how you will handle certain cases which are supposedly in the gray zone where you would not have where you would perhaps require a top-down approach. So Sai has touched upon those things, so I don't have anything to add. But generally speaking, I do believe that that justice must be served. That justice, the idea of justice, is itself up for grabs, and unless it is defined by the community, and unless it has the community is empowered to deliver justice to its own members, this top-down approach is basically colonial in nature. So that's my limited.
I think the competition is between community, and there are some individuals who are very individualistic in nature who does not who wants a separate system in place at least to avail that opportunity. If they don't want to go through the CAP system, if I am part of that community, and if I don't want to go through that, then just like we have in the marriage, I mean,
Correct.
Special Marriage Act तरफ option कर लो.
Yes. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so I think CAP and temples, we've all discussed everything. I think the last point which remains, and I'd like to pose this question, and maybe everybody can get in 2 minutes each of comments answering this question, and also in terms of closing statements, because we've already been at it for 2.5 hours. So I think we should wrap it up soon. See, I don't think any discussion on caste or caste discrimination is really complete till you speak about reservations and till you speak about the equation between Brahmins and the other castes in Hinduism. Now, as far as reservation is concerned, as far as casteism is concerned or caste is concerned, we are saying, some are making the argument that caste should end because...
No, Shikhar, Gotras are not uniform. Countless Gotras can be there in Bengali Dattas as well.
There are certain castes which have birth-based privilege, like the Brahmins, who by birth have that privilege, and hence they are at a better position to discriminate, and hence birth-based caste should end. So when you talk about reservations in today's modern day and age, I would like to ask all of you, which caste has birth-based privileges according to this union, according to the state of India?
Although, come to think of it, all the Banerjees I know are Shandillo, and all the Chakrabortis I know are Kashyap. Is that just a coincidence?
And according to the constitution, which caste in today's day and age is given a birth-based privilege? Is it the Brahmins or is it any other community? 1. 2, if the state itself is extending reservations to one community and not doing anything for the downtrodden of other communities who are viewed as having a birth-based privilege, is that reverse discrimination as well? What I mean to say is, if there is a downtrodden Brahmin, he's been given no reservation and no privileges by the state. But if there is a middle class or decently well-off SC/ST, they still get the benefit of the reservation from the state. Often the reservation does not pierce through the creamy layer and even reach the Dalits and the SCs and STs who genuinely need the benefit from the state. So what I'm trying to ask is, when you say that caste is going to end in the foreseeable future...
Oh, yeah, yes. A Chaudhuri Brahmin friend of mine is Modkallo.
As the society progresses, do you think the state is absolutely going to let caste or reverse casteism, where you're demonizing Brahmins, where you're demonizing other communities and extending a birth-based privilege to a community which I admit has been historically marginalized? But at this moment, the birth-based privilege is being extended to SC, STs and Dalits, not to Brahmins. So this is a dichotomy and this is a problem. I think all of you can get 2-3 minutes each to comment on this issue and include your closing arguments. I hope we can carry on another day. But today, since we've exceeded 2.5 hours, we'll have to wrap up. So we can start with Ashish, please. Because even people listening to us are going to kill us if Ashish doesn't speak now.
Deepak is also bored.
You do realize that you asked the question for 5 minutes and then told us to answer in 2 minutes.
I was in a debate. I was in a conversation with Sai, Harsh, Ashish, Raviji, Arihant. I barely got to speak. So in the last 5 minutes, I just vomited everything. Now you can have your say and we can end.
So first I'll question the notion of privilege itself, and I'll try to do this quickly. When we talk about privilege in the traditional scheme of jatis and varnas, what is the common metric that we're basing that on? Because these different varnas and the jatis that belong to these varnas are pursuing different goals. And like for example, in the modern society, in a capitalistic society, you would use the metric of wealth to determine your place in the hierarchy. In a communist society, you would be how close you are to the Politburo and how powerful you are, even though they claim that it's a flat society. In a consumerist society, it is about consumption and so on and so forth. But in the traditional Hindu society, where Brahmins were not supposed to accumulate wealth, where Kshatriyas were not supposed to start their own business, where Vaishyas could not interfere in the political thing.
Could not.
So when you had these neat compartments, then obviously there is no common metric according to which you will determine that privilege.
What the fuck?
Secondly, I mean this whole notion of Brahmins being privileged.
ये should not or could not पे base होगा ये पूरा argument अभी. क्या अजीब आदमी है आशीष धर.
Is totally bogus. The problems between higher castes and lower castes began. Got exacerbated because I don't claim that no conflicts existed in pre-colonial India. That is not my claim. What I'm saying is that when we refer to atrocities as such, these are instances, well-documented instances in certain pockets of India where you had conflicts between different jatis, not necessarily Brahmins versus Shudras or Vaishyas versus Kshatriyas. I mean, all sorts of combination, even in between the lower castes itself. So the whole idea of privilege itself is questionable here. But in the modern sense, when we juxtapose that and use this presentism, then that the problem of defining itself comes into play. The question of reservation, sorry, I'm taking a little longer, but the question of reservation itself, and I'll stick my neck out on this one and say that
ancient living civilization is proof that there was caste mobility.
The reason why we haven't been able to address the caste-related problems in modern India is because of the politics of this country now, which is deeply casteist, And because of this system of reservation, which I have
should
conceptually I
not or
acknowledge,
could not
it is a mark of civilized society to help and to bring up the marginalized sections to a certain level, to closer to and bridge that gap and inequality. But at the same time, the Indian political system has made it pathological, and the whole idea, the narrative of caste atrocities and the way in which data is collected. A lot of scholars have done good work on this. Supriya Pathan and Duncan Jalki specifically. They've punched holes in this whole business of caste atrocity literature. The point is that the Indian government is continuing.
Yeah, caste seems too ambiguous. There seems to be some atrocities. There seems to be anti-caste movements. So can we really even conclude on caste, bro? What fucking lazy arguments. That's the one paper every right winger seems to point to always. और नहीं तो बाला गंगाधर तो है ही. Traditional scholars को involve नहीं किया था. किसी को कुछ पता ही नहीं है. ये सब दीवार के सामने खड़े होके फालतू का rant है ये.
These caste-based reservations for vote bank politics, and that is the reason I contend that this caste atrocity literature is getting popularized, and the mainstream narrative is about caste atrocities when it should be about economics and the situation that a lot of marginalized sections are because of their clash with modern means of production and modernity and the social conflicts that come out of
that. Anybody who's ready with their closing comments?
Okay, I'll go.
Harsh.
So I'll go. Yeah. See, for me, my closing comments are, I think the Sanatana and Sanatana Dharma is only if it keeps on evolving. Anything that does not evolve is dead. It's dogma. And therefore, somebody like me, not because of my birth-based caste, but because of my professional interest, should not be having this conversation at all. Our gurus, our dharma gurus, should be the ones who, I'm not saying they don't have to lead the revolution, that would be silly to expect, but they should somehow creatively, scripturally. I'm openly saying, even if scripture says something else on caste, I'm ready to reject that particular part of scripture in toto. Of course, the Dharma Guru is not going to say that, but because they're scholars, they need to creatively interpret it for a reality, a modern reality that we are living in, and it's more likely. So therefore, if they do their jobs, immature, egotistical, offshore people like me will not have to do this. It is very important for this to be said. They are not doing their job, and therefore, a part-timer like me has to put his neck out. That's point. I think Sanatana Dharma is Sanatana because it keeps on evolving. Number two, I am a Hindu optimist, I'm a Dharmic optimist, and I'm an optimist about the...
because the scriptural and spiritual authorities are not getting into it, it's actually good that therefore everyone ends up having a voice. It's inevitably.
Civilizational state being controlled by the Dharma narrative. Sai is absolutely right. There are many demographic problems. There are trends which we can all mathematically extrapolate. There is not enough time to go into that. But I am very optimistic about this cohering further. Without adding much on that, I'll leave that point for a moment. On caste-based and therefore birth-based reservation and affirmative action, normatively, obviously, it should go. Normatively, the end goal, since we're discussing about end goal, cannot be a society without caste, but a society with caste-based reservations. Right? As an end goal, what Nupur is saying is absolutely right. Even practically, what Nupur is saying in terms of the creamy layer, in terms of even without the creamy layer, even if you go to the first-timer benefits, I think a report is about to come out that even in the OBC community, a very small percentage takes up a large part of the seat. So there are many problems that needs to be delved into and solved. But yes, normatively, there has to be a sunset clause. This cannot be the final state. I think that on the political side of it, you said there is a poor Brahman, why should he suffer? Which is, I fully agree, which is why the EWS, again, the economically weaker section reservation, was only 10%, but normatively it was introduced by Narendra Modi before last year's election, and now it is part of a narrative going forward. It is the first foot in the door to have a non-identitarian state-led affirmative action program. It's a nahi hua, and once again, the people who voted against it were from AIM, I don't know, what is the full form of the Hyderabad-based party, the guy who Sai interviewed. So, imagine the only people who kind of went out of their way to oppose it, you can read into their motives. Why are they opposing it? So, the final point in terms, I think the state, large parts of the cup and all that, once these land records get digitized, even villages becoming de facto urban amenities, a lot of what I is calling the decentralized alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, a lot of that part will become formalized. How will it exactly play out? I'm not sure. How law and technology will intersect, I'm not sure. But what we cannot say is, while we should not clamp down from against these existing institutions, but that should not prevent us from building bottom-up modern state institutions. So that the point what Arihant was saying, if there is a rebel, if there is an individualist who wants to change the narrative in that particular village, does he or she have realistically, not de jure, realistically access to modern state-led justice in their locality? So it's not about putting somebody down, it is bringing the modern state justice system above. And so we cannot give up on the Indian state. It is ours to control. We cannot be pessimistic about it. That is my closing statement. Thank you so much.
Aryan, please.
Okay, my phone battery is just less than 5%, so I just quickly make 2 points. So regarding reservation, I don't think I've seen people opposing SC/ST reservation. The main opposition is against the OBCs, who actually happen to be the people who are mostly in conflict and oppressing the the lower caste or the SC/STs. So that is one point. The main opposition is against OBC reservation. Second, even if we have to have reservation for OBC just because of their lowest economic status or so-called social status, mostly it is because of the political power. Let's accept it for what it is. But even if we have to have that, then the state needs to tell us. It has to tell us what is the basis of reservation. Is it because SC, STs or OBCs are getting reservation because they have been oppressed by the upper caste? Or is it because based on the economic status? So that clarification has not come from the state. That's what we need to hear. Second, what is the basis of putting someone in OBC and someone in SC, ST? For example, every year, not every year, every 2-3 years, we hear about the cases of new SCs being added to the scheduled caste and giving reservations, right? Or even promoted from the OBCs to SC, ST. So what are we saying? Were they not discriminated against before, or are they just suddenly we are discovering them, or we have not done the thorough job before? Whatever it is. So these contradictions we have to sort out. Another point is about the data. It is very important that whatever reservations we give to the people, it is also based on some kind of evidence that they are indeed backward, they're indeed socially, backward, socially or economically. The last caste census was in 1931, I think, right? So we are giving reservations in 2020 based on a caste census on 1930 basis. So how do you support or?
So Arihant, are you asking for a caste census?
How do you legitimize the system for the majority of the people? So you have to find shortcuts like giving it to EWS, covering everybody, basically everybody except 3-4% people in the country. You have now covered everyone in the reservation system. So these are the basic things that the state needs to do to at least justify it giving reservations to people.
Raviji, please go ahead.
Raviji, unmute, Raviji, unmute.
I'll try to be very brief on reservation. See, I do believe that reservation is required to bring up those communities who are, suffering because of economic disadvantage. The economic disadvantage of many of these communities are because of certain caste-based issues as well, especially post the British takeover where their economic power was destroyed. So I won't say that reservation education is required because of thousands of years of oppression, but rather because of the past 200 years. I go with Dharampalji on this. Yes, the issue we are facing right now is, I believe, just some 2 weeks ago, there was a report in print which quoted Dr. J.K. Bajaj as well, that 1% of the OBCs, cornered about 50% of the OBC reservation. So perhaps we need some kind of fine-tuning there to actually ensure that the real beneficiaries are those who are suffering, and it's not merely vote bank politics as it is now. Anyway, so that's the crux of it. I just want to end with answering a question raised by Arihant very, very long ago, perhaps in the previous yuga. We came down the path very long. So his question was about the missionary zeal of Hinduism. How can we convert people to Hinduism if there is the jati which exists? Before Islamic invasion stopped our navies from going to Southeast Asia and colonizing those places, we were spreading fast. As I said, we were spreading even within India from 2010 BCE. We have been a missionary religion before we were stopped, and this did not happen because we did not have jatis at the time. We had jatis. In fact, this is something which was used even by the Turks when they converted the Bulgarians to Islam. They created Janissaries. The Janissaries literally became a caste by themselves. Let us be blunt about it. If you really feel that you want to convert people from some other religion back to Hinduism now, you can convert 10,000 people. If you manage to do it, you can create a new caste if you want, if they are from a particular religion. It is not impossible. It has been done in the past. So let us not break our heads too much about it.
Caste hona hai bhi kyun?
The second thing, it was about jati and sampradaya. Just one clarification. See, the unfortunate reality is many people don't have clarity on this. A sampradaya literally means a tradition, okay? And there are 2 traditions which every person in this land belongs to, or at least belonged to in the past. One will be his jati sampradaya, what belongs to his jati, his kuladeva, based on his jati. The other will be the dharmika sampradaya. I'll give you one example here. A same person, a Rajput, may be a Vaishnava, a Shaiva, or even a Jain. There are some Jain Rajputs, if people don't know. But at the end of the day, his jati kuladevi will be different, and that is not affected by his following another dharmika sampradaya. Fair enough. So when it comes to the jati issue, only those people belonging to the jati can actually handle the temple or the kuladevi. I will tell the real problem I face, or rather I envisage with the idea given by Harsh or others, is that there are temples where Dalits have complete control. The temples belong to them. The deity belongs to them. It is their kuladevata. And if you are going to give free voting rights to everyone in a locality, especially in a place where the landed gentry might try to trample upon them, that will create absolute nonsense in the system of affairs. I am not for it. Okay, which is why I stated it has to be denomination based, sampradaya based. Based on the jati, there are certain sampradayas. Based on my dharmika sampradaya I belong to, there is another sampradaya. Let us be very clear about this distinction. And end of the day, I agree with what Nupur said. It is rather a question of jati versus jativad. There is no reason to really destroy jati completely, as I see it, because I don't see a mechanism to completely replace it. Rather, what you require is that the jatis can exist. If they're not going to have any own Vedbhav, if everyone is going to go along as friends, I see no reason why that should not happen, or no reason why we cannot have jatis existing along with this as well. I mean, it has happened in the past, it can happen in the future as well.
Just one
Okay,
point. Just
I know-
on this point, I was just referring to the so-called people, Hindus without Varna. Is that category possible? Because there are people in the West, for example, like Tulsi Gabbard. She is a Hindu, but she does not have a Varna, right?
She is a Kshatriya. भाई मॉडर्न टाइम पे तुम लोग अगर स्टेटस के तो बेसिस पे एक्सट्रापोलेट नहीं करोगे, हिंदुइज्म इज गोइंग टू बी अ गॉडडैम फकिंग म्यूजियम डिस्प्ले आइटम. अगर हिंदुइज्म को रियली बचा के रखना है, रियली अलाइव रखना है हिंदुइज्म को, नॉट इन नेम ओनली, तो you'll have to extrapolate it in today's context.
So what mechanism is there? I mean, if you can be a Hindu and you still don't have a Varna, right?
Of course, yes, it is possible. Why not? There are a whole number of people and jatis who never belong to any particular Varna, to be honest. And Varna itself is fluid, by the way. What ultimately resolves is jati. And what I think might happen in the future is, if you manage to convert, let's say, 20% of whites in the USA to Hinduism, then they might become a white jati of Hinduism, for all we know. I mean, you never know.
बड़ा रेसेर जाति वाले की.
Yeah, in fact, in the first census that was conducted, when they asked people which Varna you belong to, they had no idea.
Okay. So I think we've discussed. I know we've left a lot of issues which.
Yeah, now she's basically an Amatya, but she's been a Kshatriya all her life. Now she has changed her caste and become a Brahmin. Just like the Pal dynasty, Gopal. He used to be a Brahmin, officially became a Kshatriya, and then became a king.
I have 20 comments.
No. That's what I'm saying. Sai, make your ending comments, but please limit your time.
Bullet points. Okay. As someone who believes in reading at the very least, my suggestion would be that we split the history of Jati into 3 parts. One, before the invasions from the Arab world, then between the Arab world invasions and the British period, and post the British period, what has happened. What is actually, what seems to drive our discussions largely is based on the 200 years of the latest material that we have, but not the material before that. And a significant amount of literature has been lost to the ravages of time and history and invasions during the period before that. Okay, that's point number 1. So there's a decent chance that we are consuming lock, stock, and barrel everything that the missionary evangelical Britisher wrote about caste politics. This is especially true of Southern politics and the politics of Dravidianism in Tamil Nadu. Okay, the pernicious manner in which the Aryan invasion theory has been used to effectively Aryanize certain castes and Dravidianize certain other castes and pit them against each other is something that I can personally vouch for, given my lived experience. Okay, for all practical purposes, that's my lived experience as someone who comes from that particular place and who's lived in that particular place. That's point number 1. Point number 2. Therefore, I think it's important to understand which part of history we are actually using to create the current justifications for atrocity literature or current justifications for even reservation. So that's point number 1. Point number 2, we also have to accept the reality that the discussion within the Hindu community is happening with the presence of non-Hindu Abrahamic communities with the proselytizing intent. Okay, we are no more having a discussion between members of the same family. We are having a discussion which is out in the open with everybody else being present, who effectively has a missionary zeal, who wants to convert. Therefore, the question should be, is our reaction going to be to Abrahamize the Hindu faith so that there is absolutely no incentive to convert into an Abrahamic religion? Or do we retain portions of our history, retain certain traditions, and understand our traditions better, and look at what is it that we can draw from the past effectively to address the situations of the present? That is the role of history. History is not an academic pursuit. Point number 3, I completely and strongly subscribe to the notion that the structure of caste was effectively a proselytizing tool, but not in the sense of killing a certain deity or killing a certain tradition and then replacing it with a central figure, but to make it as part of a certain larger whole. European style and missionary style acculturation resulted in replacing all local deities with one deity and satanizing every other local deity. Whereas the dharmic form of acculturation has resulted in giving every deity a certain importance and mapping it onto a central pantheon if possible, otherwise giving it its own place and ensuring that you have a Kula Devata, you have a Grama Devata, you have a Nishta Devata, you have whatever. So multiple forms of Devatas are possible. So that's point number 4. The 5th point in terms of reservation is, you can do away with reservation if you're in a position to offer incentives to truly oppressed communities or truly downtrodden communities. And that incentive can come only if the temple is in the hands of the community, because then you have resources. As long as you depend on the state and the politician to effectively do social justice, he is going to use caste arithmetic to come to power and continue to foment caste-based discrimination in one form or the other. And that is always going to result in lopsided form of justice. The only institution which is capable of doing social justice in a relatively better manner is the temple. And I'm not saying that status quo is ideal, nor am I saying that let's go back to history completely, but junking history and to effectively apply the lens of the present to the past may not help. There are enough things that we can learn from the past and apply to the present. The way to address reservation is to truly give them not just economic support, but opportunities of employment, which the temple used to provide for all these communities. Most importantly, the bulk of the people who are downtrodden are people who are weavers and artisans who the British destroyed because of a specific interest. The weaving community was killed because they had a certain interest in cotton trade. Okay, so all these communities have effectively benefited as a consequence of very targeted exploitation and very targeted deprivation. Mr. Shashi Tharoor's book, while he speaks of the depredation of the British rule in India, he doesn't identify which are the communities which actually directly suffered as a consequence of that. When you have that,
अरे भाई टेक्नोलॉजिकल एडवांसमेंट के अगर खिलाफ बात होगा तो हम नहीं खेलेंगे ये खेल. टेक्नोलॉजिकल एडवांसमेंट के वजह से किसी ना किसी का नौकरी हमेशा जाएगा.
You're in a much better position to show what was their position before the British arrived and what happened even after that. When you have that, you will have a significant amount of answers with respect to reservation. But in principle, as long as untouchability in some form continues to exist in this country in one way or the other, I do believe that we have to find a mechanism.
All looms were not burnt. All of their thumbs were not chopped off. There might have been sporadic incidents of violence. But more importantly, even if they had their looms and their thumbs were not chopped off, तब भी क्या होता? नौकरी तो जाता ही. इंडस्ट्री के सामने वो कैसे टिकते? उनको जाके फिर नौकरी लेना पड़ता.
To deal with it and to address it. And in the absence of a better mechanism, at this stage, I don't see a viable replacement to birth-based reservation. The only thing is, should every other community effectively jump on this particular bandwagon? If so, what is the response? The response can't come from the state. The state is an actor with a vested interest. It has to come from the society. Therefore, dharmagurus, temples, institutions, and societies need to step up. The state cannot be an all-pervading creature because the state has a direct interest in this outcome. The state cannot be trusted with anything. Even the most ideal state in a democratic situation is held hostage to electoral calculations. That's it.
Okay.
Which means in the end the answer will be सब कोई पूरा का पूरा discussion करके बोलेंगे सरकार को ही कुछ करना चाहिए. Dada, you as a content creator, what should be your caste? Brahmin. Remember, you cannot retrofit jati to varna. You will never be able to find out what exactly should be my varna. I should be a Shudra as well because of being a musician, but at some points musicians were considered Vaishya. No, not really. But then self-employed musician, तो वो भी business है. Content creator, Brahmin adjacent kind of, but business भी है. तो retrofitting नहीं होगा. ये separate जाति होगा. YouTuber. उस ऐसे ही देखना पड़ेगा कास्ट को. ऐसे अगर नहीं देखा तो all our Hindu texts are absolutely irrelevant today. Or and these fucking debates will go on forever and waste everyone's time. We need modern interpretation of it. The modern profession, yes. Even that can't really end up deciding varnas because some are really too ambiguous. But jati to definitely. Yeah, Pal of Bengal. They were not Buddhists. They encouraged, gave a lot of dan to Buddhists, but they were Hindus themselves. I don't know if all of them were Hindus or were Hindus, but mostly they promoted both, but promoted Buddhism a little more. चेस बॉक्सिंग में वरना बदलना पड़ेगा every 2 minutes. A.K. Brahmo is saying the British destroyed Bengali artisan skills and pushed to penury, not some tech taking over. How do you destroy skills? Skill अगर एक बार बन गया तो वो जाता कैसे है? So you're saying all of their fingers and all of their looms were burned, right? Their thumbs were cut off to stop them from producing muslin. Yes. But was it done to each and every weaver? Or was it done to some weavers so that the rest of the weavers feel a fear and then they stop doing it? But in the end, it was a technological advancement anyway. Ship of thesis. No, the skills need to be passed down generation. Yes. Yeah, threats work. But each and every weaver lost their fingers. That as long as state is recognizing caste, people will have to take caste into consideration while making decisions. That point is important. yeah, state has to stop recognizing caste, and if at all it recognizes castes, it has to recognize professions as castes. Professions has to replace castes. It's a fully radioactive, toxic, poisonous object. At the same time, we are nurturing it and keeping it alive. No, you incentivize buying cotton at large quantities through state subsidy to mass-produce cloth economically cheaper than individual weavers. Yes, and that's always going to happen. Just like today, Udan Cafe and stuff. Okay, then we'll continue this discussion some other day. And thank you for joining the live stream, guys. It was pretty long, and at least we realized that it's a pointless debate. To listen to them on this topic, it's going to be pointless. Thank you, guys. Good night.
যদি সবাই ফিরে যায় ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা সবাই ফিরে যায় যদি গহন পথে যাওয়ার কালে কেউ ফিরে না যায় তবে পথের কাটা তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে তুই রক্ত মাখা চরণ তলে একলা দলরে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না তবে একলা চলো রে যদি আলো না ধরে ওরে ওরে ও ভাগা আলো না ধরে যদি ঝড় বাদলে আধার রাতে দুয়ার দেয় ঘরে তবে বজ্রানলে বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে আপন বুকের পাঁজর জ্বালিয়ে নিয়ে একলা জলরে যদি তোর ডাক শুনে কেউ না আসে তবে একলা চলরে একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো একলা চলো